every city you burn, I'm gonna build one high.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtrothy, the voice of New Eden, and it is April 16th, YC128. This is the Eve Universe Show. Welcome, 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 guys. How's it going? We are here in Uli. Hold on, let me make this browser go away. We are in Uli, outside of the Edencom Memorial Center, and more importantly, this Edencom Stellar Monitoring Station. And we will see why in a little while. Today is basically a tinfoil day. So it is, the election ended. Yesterday was the last day of the major election event, the last day to win, get your prizes and stuff. CCP has announced today that the turn-ins will be available for the next week. So you still have one more week to turn in your tokens. And then they'll be gone for good, or the turn-ins will be gone for good, and you'll basically be be stuck with a little bit of a commodity if you still have any. So yeah, we're going to do a little bit of, today is tinfoil day. I have two pretty fun, game theory-esque theories about the lore. One of them is a little bit smaller and an appetizer involving the election. One of them I think is a lot bigger and might lead into what is happening just broadly, especially when it comes to air and then the development of exordium. There has been a lot of complaints about some of the lore in the latest announcement for exordium, and I think that if we explore all these topics, we might be able to figure out the truth behind the subject, and it may be more interesting than we might dismissively think. But all that said, I will also say that I've moved my computer into my living room, my whole setup, so if my sound's weird or if my camera's weird, if anything's weird, let me know. In addition to that, you might hear in the background the banging around of my guinea pigs in their cage. That should be fine. Let's see, where are we? Yep. Hey, we're getting to the Torment Nexus. Okay, so let's see. To begin with, though, we want to cover the patch notes of the day. We got the news of the day. We've got some patch notes, which are pretty interesting, actually. We're going to skip past the big one and then go straight to the Yantey election. And this is where we see that the Yantey election event has concluded. So right now, the rampant drone fabricators are not in the game. However, they will return to wormholes after some additional tweaks and improvements to the system. Very cool. We'll see when that happens. So right now there are no rampant drone fabricators in the universe, but they will be back. But when they come back, they will only be in wormhole space. That's great. Everything else for the Yantey election is gone, except for the Outreach Center, which will remain active until the 23rd of April, which gives you one more week to turn in your stuff. In addition to that, there's been some other improvements to the Faction Warfare Agency. But the big news of the day is they've concluded the upgrading of the faction warfare missions. They came out with level 1s at first, and then they redid level 4s, and now they've done 2s and 3s to the same kind of idea. So we have basically all of the rats have been replaced. It effectively makes it so that you can run faction warfare missions without gaining standings losses, which is a big deal. And in addition to that, they've either changed or clarified the restrictions. So now level 2 missions count as a medium Navy complex. So only cruisers and below are allowed in, and only Tech 1 and Empire Navy equivalent. So for instance, a Vexor Navy issue is allowed in, but a Gila is not, because that's a pirate. And then level 3 missions have a large Navy restrictions, which is going to be your battle cruisers, right? Is it battle cruisers or battleships? Now I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's battle cruisers. Yeah, you guys can hear the guinea pigs squeaking off in the background. If anybody's interested in getting the guinea pigs some hay, they could probably use it. Let me know. Is this the first time that rogue drones showed up in Anoikis? No, because there's been plenty of events before where like drone sites appear throughout New Eden, including sleeper systems. So it doesn't. I'm pretty sure that rogue drone sites have appeared in wormhole space before. But yeah, so relatively minor patch, although, you know, again, more preparation for faction warfare as part of its larger purpose to the game when it comes to kind of where CCP is going with the next expansion and military campaigns, etc., etc. So, you know, pretty cool in that sense. I hadn't checked the Hobo leaks yet. Is there anything on Hobo leaks to pay attention to? Let me double check real quick. Hobo leaks. If we look at Hobo leaks, we can see, no, it was all just, oh no, that's 34 minutes ago. We see this is all just stuff for the sites. This is all just tweaks for the rats and NPCs for the stuff. Is there any cool images and stuff? Oh, here's the faction warfare summary pages having their text updated and new stuff being added to explain the whole mechanics of the game. That's good. And text being changed or added in for the it looks like the missions, so that's all fine too. Okay, great. So nothing too fancy there. So that's about it for the patch notes. We should get election results tomorrow, correct? I expect to get them tomorrow. The voting is supposed to be happening today. I would have been really surprised if we had gotten the results today. I expect to get those tomorrow, and if so, we will at least be covering it. I'm, you know, should be doing a full episode, but if not, I will try to record something and put it out right away. Once again, that will be available to members and supporters first. But you know, either way, the other big news of the day, as far as announcements go, is the CCP has posted their clash at Atioth. Now, we can always dig into this deeper on a different episode. We want to kind of breeze through this as we want to get to the tinfoil-y meatiness of it. But of course, this is what's been going on in the faction war, or not faction warfare, the NPC, not God, you know, sovereignty. The last thing I didn't mention. No, so you know, the Imperium has now gone to war with Fraternity. This I guess the first major step in this grand scale war was they've been messing around with Atioth for a while. We've been monitoring that for a couple of months now. But they attempted to anchor a keep star. This ended up being this big fight that crashed the node, etc., etc. We've talked about this before, but now CCP has put out their official section about it, so we're going to look at that. There is nothing quite like war in New Eden. The planning, logistics, leadership, and tenacity behind EVE's largest conflicts continue to produce moments that feel impossible until you make them real. Last week, the Imperium declared war on Winterco, and it did not take long for the first giant clash of this war to materialize in Atioth. The system has historically seen a lot of conflict between the Imperium and Wintercore forces, with large fights breaking out as recently as February between the two powers. I would also like to remind everybody that Atioth is the system from the Battle of Atioth, which is the fight between the Amar and the Jovians that is largely seen as kind of like the inciting incident to the modern age of of the cluster, right? The Battle of Atioth leads to the Amar's first significant defeat, which leads to the Mimitar Rebellion and so on and so forth. So Atioth has always been kind of this legendary system, or Atioth has been this legendary system for this purpose. And once again, Atioth has proven itself to be the system that giant, powerful fleets go to die. Geographically, Atioth is significant as an entry point into Winterco's territory and Geminate, so it makes sense for it to become the first real focal point in this conflict. For the Imperium, a keep star in Atioth is a significant strategic beachhead and fit for an opening salvo. Likewise, it is equally logical place for Winter Coalition to mount a response, not only to push their advantage, but to set the tone for future fights. So here we can see kind of a layout of the whole situation. Atioth would be... somewhere. No? Maybe? It'd be one of these test systems, right? Either way. Oh, no, it's right here. It's right here. Oh, I see. This is after the fact. So this is all Goonswarm territory now. Atioth was right here. That makes sense. Okay, great. So this is kind of the entry point to this whole area. My bad. I figured this would have been the before picture, but no, they're spoiling things in this. All right, the Imperium went with a show of force, placing their super capital and capital fleet on the anchoring Keepstar to protect it. Winterco adopted a Zerg rush strategy, preparing thousands upon thousands of Vexers to chip at the Keepstar down bit by bit. I have said this in the last couple of days. I love the fact that like from the bottom tier to the upper tier, this strategy of like bringing the biggest Galente Tech 1 drone boat that you can that your wallet can pay for in unlimited numbers and just continually crashing them onto the structure as a method of killing it as an Apex strategy. I kind of adore it because it kind of flies in the face of what is normally an Apex strategy. And the nice thing about it is at a certain point, you don't even need to keep bringing in new drones, right? Because like if you launch your drones, send them all out with your Vexer, and then your Vexer gets killed, you just reship into a new Vexer. The Vexer doesn't even need drones. The Vexer just goes out there, you reconnect to your lost drones, and just keep shooting. It's hilarious. All right. While the tactics were worlds apart, the preparation and organization were similar. Both sides took deliberate efforts to manage conditions at the start of the engagement. Fighter and drone deployments were staggered in an attempt to reduce the immediate strain on the server node. Is that true? That doesn't feel true just based on everything I saw and heard from the battle, but okay. As the timer approached, numbers continued to I guess before the timer got close they were doing this. That's probably true. Hi guineas. Okay, so as the timer approached, numbers continued to rise. At 1630 UTC, over 6,500 people were in system, and it kept climbing past 7,000, past 8,000, over 9,000, and a maximum population of 10,253, shattering the previous Guinness World Record of 6,557. This is what I was saying. Like, Goonswarm alone brought more people than the previous largest fight in EVE history, which is wild. Yeah, we released them by birth. Oh, that's right. I did hear about this. Like having everybody stagger it by birth month. That is such a funny story. That's true. Characters brawling over a Keepstar during the Fury at so the record is at 6,557, which is from the Fury at FWS T-Tech 8. Once again, showing the scale of EVE players are willing to reach when the stakes are high enough. Ambition and EVE players name a more iconic duo. 10,253, A Space Odyssey. At this scale, battles stop being ordinary in every possible sense. The combined weight of thousands of ships, countless modules cycling, fighters moving, drones deploying, commands relayed, bubbles dropped, reinforcements are arriving, and decisions being made across an enormous web of coordination all put enormous pressure on the simulation. These numbers are extraordinary, and extraordinary numbers in New Eden have a way of pushing performance into unknown territory. When the fight hits this scale, there's only so much that either side of the fight or CCP games can predict ahead of time. Just minutes before the Keepstar was due to online, the node hosting Atioth, which was reinforced and isolated from the rest of New Eden, collapsed under the pressure. At 1826, the last heartbeat was acknowledged from the node. At 1829, the node had terminated, and by 1835, clients in Atioth began to disconnect. So it took them 9 minutes from the last heartbeat acknowledgement to it finally, like, people disconnecting. So we see this is the server node. This is the population of Atioth. So you can see it climb. None. They struggled to get it back online. Then they get it back online. People try to rush to get on. But of course, there's this whole process of getting people online and into it. So that actually becomes a kind of a punishing situation for the server as well. And so, you know, it struggles to get up to speed. And then, of course, by this point, you know, tactics are shifting. And the fight continues all the way to downtime. Almost immediately, the system was automatically remapped to another dedicated node. This was followed by a login trouble for some players while battle raged around them. Okay, so this actually might be an interesting piece to all of it. Like, so the node goes down. Rather than trying to reboot that particular node and try to bring everything online with it, that's a whole process. They had a different node that was prepared to take things, and so they just brought that up because it was a faster solution. But unfortunately, what that meant was, the idea that Goonswarm had was that by being in the system first, they would have an advantage. But because the node changed during this process, it made it so that the people that were coming in from elsewhere actually had an easier time getting onto the server than people that were part of the crash itself. Some pilots were able to return sooner than others, especially those coming from different systems. Others found themselves facing long loading times, uncertain outcomes, and the reality of the fight that was still evolving while they struggled to get back into the game. It was due to most CCP employees were on holiday and not there to take care of it. I don't think that had much to do with it. There's not, like, at this point, there's a whole lot of like, well, what do we do? Shrug emojis going on, right? Like, you could have had every single CCP person on staff there ready to go, and I'm not sure it would have changed it much, to be honest. Others found themselves we even saw some new things happen, like sovereignty reverting to a state from earlier in the day. Yeah, that happened. That was the thing that people were talking about with me when we were talking about this, because I was very confused, and like because we can only look at the final reports now. So, this was something that happened. While a bit weird, our engineers now understand the exact circumstances that can cause this, and teams are able to rectify this in the future. Yeah, you can't compete with N+1 going infinite. In situations like this, our guiding principle has always been to get involved with as little as possible and let the simulation stand on its own. I've said this before. I call this the play the ball where it lies. Given the way EVE's economy and wars are structured, it is vital for us that we remain as fair and consistent as possible for everyone involved. After reviewing what happened in this fight, it is that approach that we are taking as well. That said, battles at this scale are inherently unpredictable, so we carry out a thorough post-mortem review to understand what happened and decide case by case whether any response is needed. Since this conflict is only in the early stages, more large-scale engagements are almost certainly going to still to come. As always, if you're planning or expecting a major engagement, please make sure to submit a fleet fight reinforcement request at least one downtime before the fight. Reinforcement remains one of our most important tools available for helping us prepare a system for extreme player concentration and for giving these fights the best chance of running smoothly as possible while under heavy load. We know that this isn't always possible, and we'll work with FCs and leaders to facilitate emergency remaps, but the fleet fight notification tool remains the best and most reliable way to have a beefier node to brawl on. Yeah, the fine meme. This is fine. Everything's fine. The next milestone. The pilots of New Eden have always found a way to reach higher, and EVE has grown alongside them. Players push the envelope as to what is possible. We continue to work to improve performance with a better hardware, better software, and changes to the system that shape these battles. As EVE players continue to create large wars and bigger fights, these battles keep bringing the game into new territory. So, Battle of the Battle of Atioth. I assume, is this losses? This is losses, not characters, right? Because it says 10,000 characters, but I assume these are losses. So 33 Titans, 162 Dreadnoughts, 4 super carriers, 30 carriers, 299 battleships, 408 combat battlecruisers, 241 heavy assault cruisers, 1,600 cruisers. I think it's funny that they use the Caracal here for the cruiser when they clearly should have used the Vexor, right? And then 1 freighter, probably filled with a core, and 10 force auxiliary was destroyed. Yeah, this is total destruction. Will a bigger fight follow? Atioth was one of the biggest barriers until they get to Fade. That is one of the things that, one of the things I noticed was after this fight, of course, Fraternity repositioned outside of away from Atioth, and I kind of made cheekily in Discord the joke where it's like, well, yeah, retreat is exactly what you do when you've won. Because they're triumphing this victory against Goonswarm. But the thing is that if anything, the Imperium have demonstrated exactly how crazy they are. It's like that dude that's like punching him in the face, themselves in the face, because it's fun, and you're you're trapped in the jail cell with them, and you're like, oh my god, this guy's coming after me next, right? I think that even though the Fraternity had a much better result than anybody would have predicted originally, you still can't look at what happened and think that everything's hunky-dory, right? Like, if anything, the sheer threat and the sheer force of the Imperium it has been put on display, and everyone's on notice. And I personally believe that, especially since now it's kind of shown that like a single side of this war has enough forces to cripple the node. Like the N+1 strategy is in fact kind of in question right now, because both sides have the capability of just shutting it down and everything that means. And so I think that there's a part of this where all three major forces involved, and by that I mean Winterco, the Imperium, and CCP, watch this fight with a blanched face going, how the hell are we going to execute the rest of this war? So it's going to be a very fascinating one. It certainly isn't even close to done yet. It's barely even begun. But like, this fight really, like, in the end is going to be the thing that sets the tone for the entire war. It's very similar to like in the Halloween War, when they crashed the node using drone boats accidentally, and so like a week later in BTAC-R, they intentionally pulled out all their subcaps in order to make sure to do maximum damage against the Titan fleets and Titan Iomaki. Like, that kind of ended the Winter War. Like, in that same sort of way, I think that this fight and what it did to the servers and what it means for the forces that are arrayed against each other, they're going to have to like they're going to have to rethink their strategies across the board. Goons don't really lose. More like you let them slack their bloodlust and they leave you alone for a bit. Well, I mean, at some point, Winterco is going to want to win. I could be incredibly insidious and just make 1,000 alpha accounts and log in, go into combat, log out, log into another account. I mean, yeah, there are ways of going about this, and you know, you never know, more things might be seen as like an exploit or like not valid gameplay, but my point is that this fight was a wake-up call for everybody involved to be like, this war is not going to just be about Apex forces smashing into each other. It's so much more complicated than that because of just the size and power of these forces. More than 10,000 players on one side, or in one system, is an extraordinary milestone. Nearly 10 trillion ISK destroyed in the first major clash of the new war is another. Together, they make Atioth one of those battles that immediately earns a place in history of New Eden, with a clear sign that the conflict is just getting started. You see where Atioth sits in relation to other historical fights. You can see Battle of M2 at 25 trillion, the second Battle of M2 at 14 trillion, Battle of Atioth at 10 trillion. So it's still not as big as some of these bigger, but the Battle of M2 was basically, in a lot of ways, was kind of a turkey shoot. It was the opposite situation, where the servers behaved in a way that was very advantageous to the Imperium, and they were able to do maximum damage to the to the Pappy forces, if I remember correctly. I think the next time it'll be a lot more battleships and lower ships and risking catapult ships. Maybe. That's my point, is that it's going to be interesting. Largest battles in USD. So this is converting it to American dollars based on the price of Plex, I assume. So in that case, the Battle of M2, the first battle was $340,000, and the Atioth battle was $74,000 worth of stuff just evaporated. So pretty cool. We salute the so it's the more people but less destruction. Now, a big piece of that was that the server struggled so greatly that the amount of destruction was actually limited by that fact. We salute the pilots who formed, traveled, fought, logged back in, and kept the battle going deep into the following day. This is one of the reasons EVE remains singular in the world of MMOs. When players choose to go all in, they do so at a scale that keeps redefining what massively multiplayer can mean. This work does not stop. Battles like this are exactly the kind of events that drive us to continue improving EVE's performance alongside our own your own tenacity. And that is actually a really good point, is that every single time these kinds of battles happen, and they kind of mentioned it earlier here, what's nice about this is they get so much telemetry, they get so much data that comes out of this about what actually happens, because as they build these server systems, like, they can't actually test it at this kind of load. They have ways of like simulating this level of load, but there's only so much you can do, and things aren't real until they're real. And in this case, like, this is where a whole bunch of data comes from, which might lead to a whole bunch of new development and improvements to the server and its systems. So that's good too. Yeah, so I think that's about it for this discussion, right? For this part of the discussion. Well, there's great memes and stuff. We're not going to cover those today because we're kind of just trying to jump through this so we can get to the tinfoil. But let's go look at the official battle report according to CCP. We have 5,000. Wow. Okay. So this suggests that there's only 5,000 pilots on the Goon Swarm side and 7,000 pilots on the Fraternity side. Even though the Imperium kind of already had, like, by this point, there wasn't that many Fraternity pilots in the system by the time it had climbed to almost 7,000. So I wonder if that's just because so many of the Imperium pilots never actually made it to the fight because of disconnects and stuff. Oh, hold on. But yeah, this is, and we can see, yeah, Goon Swarm was there first. Is this fleet strength? This is so cool. I've never seen this kill report system before. I'm gonna have to check it out. Yeah, most of you guys are stuck in a black screen, so I think that some of these numbers are a little bit, you know, misleading because of that. But these are like people that actually participated in the actual fighting in the end, not the people that were just like vaporized or never logged in during that time, or re-logged in, I should say. So pretty stark. We see that, you know, the ISK efficiency strongly on the side of Fraternity. Fraternity lost significantly less ISK, only 1.3 trillion versus Goon Swarm's almost 8 trillion. And that's because most of the ships that they lost were these 4,108 Vexers, of which over half of them were destroyed during the process, as a major thing. And like I said when we talked about this before, the problem with like accusing either side of manipulating things is the fact that both strategies that they were deployed by both sides were valid on their own right. As I mentioned, like the Vexer strategy to kill the structure is just a good strategy to kill the structure, especially under these kinds of pressures. So it's hard to say that either side intentionally damaged the node, like explicitly, in a way that they should be at fault. And it doesn't look like CCP is interested in calling out anybody for that. They have a much more neutral kind of take on everything that happened, but the God honest truth is that this is just the beginning. So we're just going to have to keep watching this to see whether or not it gets even nastier than this. Usually wars are not the coolest fight of a war is not the first one. So this could be an exciting couple of months. Either way, that is it for this, and let's get on to the tinfoil, shall we? I have two different pieces of tinfoil to bring up to you guys. One is a smaller appetizer. Not sure if it's a big one, but it's kind of funny. And then the other one is related to, is much bigger, and I think is related to all of this stuff, but is a little bit like I'm still trying to bring all the pieces together, right? But I wanted to show this to you guys as soon as possible. Maybe you guys will help me kind of flesh out some of these details. But we're going to start with the appetizer, which would be, if I turn off that browser and turn on that browser, Alex Moreau. Now, obviously, the election is already done. So what's going to happen is going to happen already. But we're going to look at one of the candidates because of a little thing that Malak found that got me running down a rabbit hole, which again, like, who knows whether or not this is going to pay off or not. So Alex, of the three candidates, in my opinion, is kind of the most interesting. It's the one that I backed throughout most of the election, and it's the one I often jokingly call 3 road drones in a trench coat. I do hope that Alex Moreau wins, partially because of this theory. But so what if I told you that I think that this election was not the first time that Alex Moreau ran for president? That's I guess the top level of what's interesting about all this. So first of all, like, Alex Moreau has also garnered a lot of attention in all of this because of the fact that they use she them pronouns with a focus towards them they. This is one of those things that it has been one of those discussions that have come up on numerous different occasions, and I've kind of addressed this a couple times on the stream. Now this is obviously a choice of the lore writers, which are real people that live in the real world, but this is always kind of like, I've wondered if like I've seen a lot of knee-jerk reactions to this idea from people interested in modern like actual world politics and whatnot. This idea of, you know, pronouns and everything obviously is a very complicated and long discussion that a lot of people have very different opinions about. And so I found it interesting that CCP would even intentionally step into that discussion by explicitly making Alex Moreau they them pronouns and then confirming that. And I've always kind of felt that this isn't about like CCP going woke. They haven't made a big deal about it. They did actually refer to Alex as a her during the very first announcement that they say she here in this discussion, and they've never fixed it. They could have changed it, but they didn't. And when they confirmed their pronouns, they said she, they, and they write them, the writer of the real life person prefers a they them pronoun, but they never really gave, I mean for this character, but they never really gave like an explanation why this is, which is kind of the joke behind, oh, it's because they have multiple consciousnesses, or they're 3 rogue drones in a trench coat, or they're an Intaki reborn, and so maybe they don't have the same idea of gender that we do. And I think that speculating, like looking at this situation from our real life political lens, misses the entire point, because this is something that's happening in their fictional universe. And I would like to propose the idea that this is to hint that there's something else going on with Alex. And I think that we might have figured out what it is, which is that Alex, again, this may not be the first time they've ever run for president. So let's look at what we know about Alex. So Alex, as of the beginning of this whole thing, was the governor of the Boyens constellation, which is part of the sync liaison. So not really where Intaki is. However, when we go back to some of the other information about her, when they see the presidential profile, we can see that she was the youngest ever Intaki citizen to be accepted into the University of Kali. She was only 15 years old, but even by that point, she was a genius. They tried to interview her when she was 15. She cancels the meeting and calls them asinine and reductive before walking out. We do not know how old Alex is, and therefore we do not know when this meeting happened or how long it's been, but we do know that she has allegedly not given any interviews since she was 15. In addition to that, they also point out that, where is it? Moreau's political career began as a member of the Intaki Assembly. So she becomes the local part of the local administrative body of the Intaki system, though they had moved to Governor Boyens before Agard's invasion. So Agard's invasion, which was during, was it 2023? That's Uprising. So by 2023, she is no longer part of the Intaki Assembly, and we can assume that she was already, YC125. Well, either way. So by that point, she has already moved on from the Intaki Assembly to being the governor. So her time with the Intaki Assembly would have had to have been sometime prior to 2022, right? Okay, so not a whole bunch to go with. And I've said before that like it feels like they've made these characters kind of out of whole cloth, and we've dug into things like Rodin's history, even though Rodin as a character is kind of a new thing. Obviously the Rodin family is well known, and her position within the family, while technically new, does like work together with everything else we know about the Rodin family. So we were able to kind of look a little bit into that. But Alex and Lucas are much more new. And Lucas, of course, starts all of this process by impeaching Celes Agard. And then, we see Rodin step in pretty quickly, but we also see Alex stepping in even before all of this kind of like as this stuff is all coming out, because Lucas is calling out Agard specifically for connections to rogue drones. Alex, who is connected to the University of Kali, who is theoretically connected to rogue drones, especially robotics and AI regulations, connected to that and their understanding of AI. She obviously has a lot of interest in AI. I apologize. They have a lot of interest in AI and such. And so it's interesting that this person kind of comes out of nowhere, and we have a spotty past about them that is relatively, we kind of know a little bit about their past, but not a whole bunch. So let's go back to the Gallente presidential elections that occurred in 2015. Gallente presidential elections enter advanced voting stage. Now, this election was by far one of the quietest elections that we've had in the modern era, right? This is the one. This isn't the one where Rodin wins by, this isn't the first one that Rodin wins. It's not the one that Celes Agard wins. This is that middle one where Rodin kind of wins comfortably, even more than before. And so we kind of brush over this. They introduce a whole bunch of little these candidates. Some weird stuff happens to a couple of the candidates that are kind of suspicious. There's always been a few conspiracies about Rodin involving these other candidates and what happens to them, but we largely just kind of skimmed over them. So we can see that here there is it enters into the advanced stage, and we see that we have 5 additional candidates beyond just Rodin. This is Celes Agard, Ilairon Odama, digital artist Kellen Ontbod, actress Serena Nova, and the former mayor of Arcurio and Caldari Prime resistance fighter Shalin Ramnev. Now, each of these characters, all of these characters besides 2, so Shalin Ramnev, Kellen Ontbod, especially, and of course Celes Agard, these characters have continued to be important characters, right? Shalin Ramnev and Kellen Ontbod were very critical to both the Yantey and just general Gallente politics over the last several years. Ilairon Odama does kind of disappear into the background. We see, so Shalin Ramnev talks about, here's a speech that's given by Shalin Ramnev. Her major position is about Caldari Prime because she was the mayor of Arcurio. She, of course, continues this story. We talk about this during the Gallente election breakdowns and stuff. That's fine. Kellen Ontbod is a Verrucior artist. He's also one of those characters that has shown up a couple of extra times, especially as the pro-Mimitar contingent. He was one of the guys that helped deal with the Yantey unrest. And so he continues forward. We have Ilairon Odama. Now, we don't actually see anything further from Ilairon Odama after this, but we do know that the word Odama is important because Odama is like the religious leaders of the Yantey. These are the ones that can do consciousness transfer in theory without the use of technology. And so, but there's this whole thing between the different Odamas that we're not going to cover into today, because there's different sides of the Yantey, like people feeling about the state of Yantey and whatnot. And so as part of this, they're actually he was attacked by effectively Intaki separatists, right? The Viret Legion. Viret constellation is the constellation that includes Intaki, and so his election day rally is attacked by these more extremist Intaki members, which is specifically connected to the Inibra death cult, which is connected to the Serpentis and the Blood Raiders. We've covered the Inibra death cult a lot when it comes to the relationship between Intaki, but again, this is kind of just a tangential thing to today. I'm just explaining why Aileron Adama kind of disappears from our knowledge of the world, right? So then that brings us to one remaining candidate, Serena Nova. So Serena Nova, there's so little information about her. She's just a popular musician who then, as you know, if you look at the actual Gallente election stuff, the New Eden news of it, do we see it here? Hold on, did I do it right? No, this is, yeah, wait, hold on. Let's see. This is YC128. So if we go all the way down to the beginning here, we can see that this is all directly after Caroline Starr, by the way, which is an interesting point, right? This is right after Caroline Starr. This is the emergence of the Drifters. All that stuff is happening right now. And where is it? So we see, we can see that it enters advanced voting stage, and then we see a spotlight on Shireen Ramnev. We see Kellen Antbod. We see Rodin. But then when it is Serena Nova's turn to do something, voice modification surgery leaks discredits Serena Nova. Withdrawals of backers lend credibility to claim. Why am I talking about all this? Why am I talking about this weird musician that disappeared? This morning, several major news outlets, including The Scope, received packages containing medical documents indicating voice modification surgery on a patient named Alice Moreau. Additionally, the packages of materials contained identification paperwork indicating that this is the real name of the Gallente presidential candidate, Serena Nova. The Scope is yet to establish a source for this leak, and initial investigations have confirmed the absence of fingerprints, DNA, or other traces on the packages. It seems clear that whoever is behind these leaks was careful to take precautions against being identified. The use of this anonymous courier service to deliver physical packages and avoid electronic channels further suggests extreme care to avoid being traced. While the Scope investigation continues, it is likely the originator of the leak will not be identified. In the wake of this leak and the rush to publication by more intrusive outlets that receive the material, speculation among those who support Nova's candidacy is that this must be an attempt by another candidate to discredit her. Nova's supporters have declared their unadulterated loyalty. One supporter, a gentleman of obvious means and professional bearing who wished to remain anonymous, told us, quote, "I feel what is done to meet the needs of the entertainment industry does not affect her abilities as a politician," end quote. More forthright supporters have claimed that this incident has only strengthened their support, suggesting that it portrays Nova as more human with the same flaws we all share. Some have pointed out these documents may be counterfeit. Nonetheless, several financial backers of the Nova campaign has withdrawn public support and funding. We sought contact with the notable corporate backer Egonix Incorporated and have confirmed that they are no longer backing Serena Nova's run for the presidency. The official position of Egonix Inc. was, quote, "They do not support and would not wish to promote an atmosphere in which artists feel forced to undergo such procedures. Moreover, the concealment of this type of modification raises questions as to the integrity of the candidate," end quote. We have contacted Serena Nova's campaign office and were given no further comments other than there will be a public response to this situation soon. There was never a public response. Coming so near the close of the voting, these revelations have potential to swing many potential votes away from Nova and towards any of the other candidates. So we have a character named Alice Moreau, spelled differently, that was found basically creating this character, Serena Nova. So Serena Nova never existed, right? Serena Nova was not a real person, ever, okay? We only know them as an actress, okay? So here's my speculation. All right. We have this young, brilliant person with who thinks very low about normal people. She becomes one of the youngest people to ever be part of the University of Kali, gets really big into AI and robotics research in particular. I think that Alex created Serena Nova, and I suspect that actually it is possible that Egonics, which is one of the major one of the major media entertainment groups within the Gallente, didn't really know this, right? So, you know, we have AI in the modern day. You know, we have AI musicians topping the charts, people creating entire identities out of AI actors. And so it would seem that Alex Moreau may have attempted to get voice modification so she could take a new personality, a new persona known as Serena Nova, and got caught almost, right? Like, the information that they get, the leak does show this information, but they get the name slightly wrong. It's almost as if whoever did figure this out threatened Alex with this, right? Like, hey, we're gonna let this stuff out, but if you just shut up about it and go away, it'll be over, right? This mistake, this conspiracy was exposed, but the true nature of the person who was behind it wasn't. They report Alice Moreau instead of Alex Moreau. And so then, as soon as this happens in 2015, what does Alex do? She vanishes from the election and gets into local Intaki politics, becomes a member of the Intaki Assembly, manages that throughout the whole Kaldari invasion of Intaki, then becomes the governor of Borins, and then eventually runs for president again. Again, there's no way for me to know this for sure, but that's just a theory, a game theory. I don't know if it'll ever go anywhere, but it was pointed out. And by the way, this character, Alex Moreau, never seen before or since. Or sorry, Alice Moreau is never seen before or since. Serena Nova is never seen before or since. So yeah, that is our appetizer tinfoil of the day. What do you guys think? Am I crazy or not? There's still a lot of weird missing pieces, like the fact that, you know, she did spend quite a bit of time in working for the University of Kali. This could have been a giant conspiracy within the University of Kali. There's also other pieces where Alex Moreau seems to be very, very, very well connected to the media and understanding media and how to communicate with different people. You know, she's got her massive feeds coming in. Is she still getting support from Egonics or other groups? That's a big question. You know, obviously it'll depend a lot whether or not she gets elected. Yeah, and we do have seen a lot of other actors and actresses that use stage names. But the thing is that, remember, Alex Moreau does a lot of speaking stuff. She doesn't do interviews, right? But she does do a lot of presentations and other such things. And so, like, it would make sense that if she wants to try to step into a new identity, she would want to have voice alterations done, and that would be why she'd want to do it secretly, right? In the Gallente, it should be fine to just do voice modification. It's the fact that she did it, she tried to cover it up, that was the important thing. And so I think that Alex Moreau may be Alice Moreau, and this is actually her second attempt to run for the presidency. All right. Makes them an even better candidate that they've already were. Yeah, I mean, I love, this is why I love Alex as a as a candidate, and I have this whole time, because she is by far the most interesting one. And the fact that, like, if you then jump into the idea that, like, Lucas represents the most radical, like, breakaway from the common norms. You know, he takes down the presidency, he's starting up all of these, you know, his message is so much more different than the standard Galente message when it comes to, like, his kind of salt of the earth populism. And so it is also worth noting that, like, this character, sure, like, this whole thing, like, if you want to see, like, okay, well, maybe this was done intentionally. If this was done intentionally, then who was it that not Celine, who benefited the most from this coming out? And the answer is Roden did. So it's weird that these conspiracies kind of, like, circulate around Roden and the establishment, and that these characters kind of jump out in order to kind of seize control of the narrative, just as Lucas starts to make a name for himself and starts his presidential campaign. So, yep, there we go. Fun times. All right, now let's go on to the big one. Okay, let's go on to the big theory. You ready? So some of that stuff is going to be useful potentially with what's going on here, but this one is going to be a much bigger one. I do hope to hear their voice in this Tomorrow Scope video. That's actually a really good point. All right. Where to begin? Hold on. The Association for Interdisciplinary Research, AIR Laboratories. This is a big one, just because of what happened this week, right? So this was what we covered Tuesday, I think it was. So, you know, this is the announcement of the new space region, right? Which is Exordium, right? And we got some details in here that I think is interesting and allows us to kind of look back and see a little bit about what's going on, okay? So Exordium was chartered by a joint Concorde and Air expedition that began in YC. Yes, it's going to involve the Drifter image. Of course it's going to involve the Drifter. I mean, a little bit. Like, there is a Drifter image. Yep, there's this one. No, but yeah, the Guineas are excited. All right, so Exordium was chartered by a Concorde and Air expedition that began in YC123. That would be 2021, which would be the same year that Celis Agard was elected, at a special public signing held by the inner blah, 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 blah. All right, this first expedition to explore the stars that make up the Exordium began when Air took over the Capsuleer training program in YC123. It will contain over 50 star systems. This region's blah, 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 and it'll be connected to Ulai. All right. Establishing a new region is no small feat. The spacefaring people of New Eden are used to moving between the stars with the assistance of stargates, which turn distances of light years into seconds of travel. But what about when there's no gate present in a star system? Jump drives capable of near instant travel between stars can only plot courses to systems that have already been precisely charted. Otherwise, they risk hurling ships into dangerous phenomena. Historically, the only option has been limited conventional engines. This means that reaching new systems have been an expensive endeavor that takes decades to complete, and because of this, many stars within New Eden cluster remain unexplored. So this is, yep, Guineas need likes, and hey, but that's not the point. So hold on, let me move myself over here. Okay, hold on, I forgot. After all of this stuff, I still forgot one thing that I need to pull up, which is the Old Man Star Chronicle. So it was brought up by a few people that lore that we just read is odd. So the star system that makes up Exordium has previously remained unsettled due to their limited resources did not justify the cost of permanent occupancy. However, according to the head of Inner Circle, the lack of resources was actually a boon. When Air first approached us with the plan, we quickly agreed that it would be important to select stars that would not be so desirable that they would become a frontier for conflict. Our interest was to establish a space that would foster unity in a spirit of exploration. So the decades it normally takes to explore new star regions would have taken the logistics of establishing entirely new region prohibitive. Though impractical for a system exploration due to its unique capacitor restrictions, our drives allow colony ships to maintain warps between... Hold on. According to Belligerent, the solution came in the form of Air's proprietary super stable warp drive technology. Though impractical for system exploration due to unique capacitor restrictions, our drives allow colony ships to maintain warp between the stars. This innovation turned decades of travel into just a few short years. Air and Concord dispatched construction and research team aboard vessels fitted with these drives into Exordium. Since arriving, they've worked hard at building the nascent infrastructure for this new region. So the first piece to this is the Old Man Star Chronicle, which says interstellar jump drive technology is still fairly new. Until it came along, the only way for empires to expand their territory was to send a ship to a solar system to build a Stargate. The fastest version of these construction ships managed a speed of about 30% of the speed of light. At that speed, a system 10 light years away would be reached in 33 years, or that about. The crew of the construction ship was put into cryogenic stasis for the duration of the ship, only to be revived when the destination is neared. Later, after jump drive technology became available, several of these ships were retrofitted with jump drives. This meant that decades-long trips were a thing of the past. However, none of these older models could have been built to handle this sort of technology found from jump drives. This meant that stories of faithful malfunction circulated frequently. One such story was of Old Man Dario's construction ship. So in YC111, we had a Galentian construction ship, which was, according to this, one of the larger ships that got retrofitted with the newer jump drives, has a malfunction and like basically crashes into an asteroid, and he goes and makes the whole thing. So the question is this a retcon? Is this a contradiction in the lore, right? Because according to this, you know, yeah, by YC11, we already started to have actual jump drives. And sure, this is like a cautionary story, but like they've also said that it's gotten a lot better since then. So what do they mean here by suggesting that this now, in the year of our Lord YC123, that just now we're starting to get jump drives? Is this a contradiction? Well, the problem here is actually an understanding of space-time as EVE Online understands it. And the thing is, actually, let me find one more thing real quick to pull up. So here is the lore article for Stargates, right? No, hold on. Is it? Yeah. Okay, so Stargates are hard, right? Now, some of this lore has been sort of retconned, sort of smoothed off, because according to this lore, it requires a binary star system, and obviously we don't really have binary star systems in EVE, so in theory there should be no Stargates. But what we basically, the short of this is that space-time, as we know it, we understand three-dimensional space-time, but in EVE Online, they've begun to understand the fourth dimension of space-time, which is largely known as subspace or whatnot, right? And so there's a lot of stuff with this. The Triglavians live in deep abyssal subspace. Wormholes function by tunneling through subspace. And so with this idea, areas of space can be connected through subspace that are not necessarily close to each other in what we think of in three-dimensional space, right? And so when it comes to warp drives, and gravity, by the way, affects things on all levels, And so, you know, what ends up happening is I don't think they're going to have a good picture here. Hold on. Yeah. So here we see, so what they do is they map out the local space-time topology, because space-time topology is very complicated. It's influenced by all of the different astral body, or, you know, like planets and stars within the area, as well as other astral phenomena that can cause unforeseen deviations in space-time topology. So what they do is they find a position, two positions in space that are relatively stable, like a Lagrange point, as it were, of gravitational forces, but are near each other or resonant with each other, as they think about it, through the fourth dimension of space-time. And so then they use gravitons to flow between them to kind of push into space-time, causing these depressions to touch, and that's what creates a wormhole. And so stargates have to be carefully measured and can't just be built anywhere, right? They connect specific systems. And so I think that what's important to note about this is that the Old Man Star system wasn't actually that far away from the other systems, and there had been a lot of other development happening in this area prior to Orpheria, which is Old Man Star, becoming a target for transportation. So what I think that they're saying here, is the key here is this understanding, because a lot of people read this to be like, oh, well, you need to have a person build the gate there or light a Sino there or whatever, right? Or, you know, whatever. But it says specifically can only plot courses to systems that have already been precisely charted. And I think that charted is the operative word here, because what you need to do is actually map the topological layout of fourth dimensional space-time within that area, right? It isn't just enough to know that there's a star there that you want to go to. You actually have to map the entire route to that star. And if you think about that, like the hyperspace telemetry and all that sort of stuff, this is what everything has been about recently when it comes to the drifters and the drifter wormholes and all that kind of stuff. Understanding, hyperspace telemetry and transportation through other layers of space-time, right? And so you can know that a star is out there, and it's actually relatively easy to know what kind of resources are in any given star system. We can do this in the modern day, right? Where, by measuring the light coming off the star, the ways that the planets interact with the light coming off the star, and various other methods, we can kind of predict what kind of resources, what kind of materials are in the star and in the different planets and stuff that's out there in space that we can see. So you could theoretically see a star that's far away and be like, that star doesn't have very much for us. That makes sense. But what really comes down to is this idea of like, do they have travel between the stars? Okay. And so, there were some other suggestions that were brought up. I think it was, who was it that was arguing the point the most? It was, Wizard and, oh no, it also, yeah, you guys, you can raise your hands. Like the criticism was the fact that this feels like a little bit of a lie, right? They should have, they already have this capabilities. But I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think that, like, we haven't, we're tinfoiling out. So we haven't gone to a wholly new star system in a very long time. Now, actually, that isn't true. Now that I've said that, and I said it before, there is actually another thing I want to pull up, which is Eye of the Needle. Eye of the Needle is a chronicle that is about the discovery of Thera. And so what we see here is that in the discovery of Thera, which is in YC112, is there anything about how they traveled? Because the whole point is that they make it to a new star system. They've been surveying candidate system 6 for the better part of 12 hours, and Zakari could tell his entire crew was in need of a break. It was becoming apparent to all that candidate 6 was not the hoped for wormhole nexus system that the Sanctuary School had been searching for over the past several months. So for the past several months, the SOE has been going to systems that we now know are connected to Anoinkus, but up until this point had not been gone to, right? Because when Caroline Star happened, the SOE were already there, and how they got there was not clear. But this story shows that they have these capabilities, and that means that they're able to travel those distances, right? So where does this come from? Where does this technology come from? And a big piece of this is... Did I not have it here? No, I don't have anything ready, man. Hold on. So that leads me to this presentation by an old friend of mine, Ravis, who does a lot of lore reviews and stuff. When he was breaking down from that same period of time, right, around the time that the Thera was discovered, SOE come out with their own set of ships, including, you know, all the SOE ships that we have, except for, you know, obviously the battlecruiser, which is new. What's interesting about this is that, you know, you see weird influence in this, in the fact that you can see the rings on the different SOE ships. We still don't have any idea. Yes, that's what we're talking about. And I don't think it's lore breaking, but I think it's curious. So one of the groups that is involved in the development of the SOE ships is a group called Propel Dynamics. Okay, Propel Dynamics, maker of a ring-shaped warp drive for the SOE ships, presumably under independent contract, since there's nothing else like it. Propel's name appears numerous times on numerous places and is clearly an advertisement as much as a sponsorship. So Propel Dynamics is working with the SOE on new propulsion systems at about the same time that the SOE are able to make it to these new systems, including Thera. Okay, and this is back again. This is back in, like, well, this is 2014, but a lot of this starts in 2009 to 2012, right? Is as this production is being done. And of course, this is a Thucker guy that's related to this, but that's somewhat different. Yeah, so it's YC112, which is hold on, actually, yeah, never mind. Yeah, so YC112.709 is the log entry where they finally find Thera. So that's going on. So they have this capability of traveling to unknown systems, at least somewhat, by this time. All right. So that leads us to this post that I found 11 years ago, called Lore of the Ishikone Corporation Connection. Ishikone is in on the drifter business. This long name, an Ishikone think tank, is responsible for designing the target spectrum breaker. Note, however, that Propel Dynamics, developer of SOE ships, unique propulsion system, which is clearly based on drifter tech, is not an Ishikone corp. I went hunting for this, and I don't know why he makes this claim, but it is kind of interesting that, so Propel Dynamics is, in theory, not an Ishikone corp member. That's something that's worth noting. However, they were one of the mega corporations with offices located in Arcurio, which Ishikone now controls, because, you know, as the fighting over New Caldari Prime. When New Caldari Prime gets taken back over by the Caldari, Ishikone is one of the people that steps in to help manage it. And so that puts Ishikone in direct control over whatever was going on with Propel Dynamics at that time. Ishikone is a very involved group. They were the ones that invented Vitalk, and they are the first group to have gotten their hands on Capsuleer tech from the Jovians. And then we can also see that about this same, in the very, very beginning, we see in 2004, Ishikone and Khanate Kingdom signs multi-trillion trade deal on transcranial microcontrollers. This is a little bit less important, but this does show that there's strong connections between Ishikone Corp and Khanate in theory, especially through the development of these transcranial microcontrollers. Okay, so let's jump to... Oh yeah, and also here's the thing about them selling it at bulk rates, which kind of puts them on the map. So that leads us to the Air Research Laboratory a little. We're going to be jumping around a lot. Like I said, there's a lot to talk about here, and I'm not 100% sure all of the details, but this is interesting. Yeah, Cure for Vitalk. My bad. Did I say Vitalk? You're right. Cure for Vitalk. This is Ishikone was the CEO of Ishikone was the guy who was killed by the broker in an attempt to disrupt the development of the cure for Vitalk. Okay, so the big piece to note about the... Oh gosh, I have this all over the place. All right. So we're going to jump to 2021. The Association for Interdisciplinary Research makes its public debut, ULI Genesis. There's a new name on the lips for those with the fingers on the pulse of New Eden's tech scene, the Association of Interdisciplinary Research. This group, in a press release, CEO Elda Belasharan and COO Daisuke Ojala, the corporation lays bare its ambitions. The Association for Interdisciplinary Research is proud to announce its debut into the New Eden's corporate landscape. Blah, 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 blah. Where does it say it specifically? Yeah. AIR was founded by two entrepreneurs who split from their respective corporations to create their own. Elda Belasharan, formerly of the Sisters of Eve, and Daisuke Ojala, formerly of the Ishikone Corporation. So we have one person from the SOE and one person from the Ishikone Corporation that basically make air research laboratories. All right. Stick with me. There's a few more things to go. Ready? Is this going to be the right one? No. Our timeline of events is actually, we're going to jump back in time a little bit to 2018. YC120, Upwell Consortium looks forward to increased profits ahead of Flex product line launch. So basically, obviously Upwell Consortium has been a thing for a while at this point. They've come out with their major structures and such. And so now they're releasing their newest versions of the structures, the Flex structures, which are the lower, they're not designed for like living per se, but they're, functional. So we have the Ensilibix Jump Gate, the Paralux Sino Beacon, and the Tenebrix Sino Jammer, right? Those are the three things that we're talking about here. But the big one that's worth noting is discussing Upwell's research and development efforts. Chairman Arteo conceded that investigation of Triglavian technology has proved to be a boon for researchers and member corporations such as Propel Dynamics, okay, and Yitri. So Propel Dynamics is, I guess, a Upwell member corporation. I wasn't able to find like too many locked-in pieces of them being referred to in this, but here we go. So Propel Dynamics was working with Upwell in researching Triglavian technology, which leads to the development of the Ensilibix Jump Gate. And the chairman highlighted in particular the improvements of the Enceladix made to possible by such research. Quote, we have been able to take advantage of certain insights provided by Triglavian conduit technology and the exert conduit coupler incorporated into the Enceladix that has marked increase the speed and stability with which to point-to-point FTL transport conduits can be established between star systems. And so if we go and we look up the exert conduit coupler, we see that it says this novel structure component developed by Upwell Consortium and used the construction of faster-than-light transport devices such as jump gates. The exert conduit coupler is derived from experiments based on analysis of Triglavian spatial temporal filament and conduit gate technology. While replication of the Triglavian FTL transport technology has proven challenging, a method of enhancing and establishment of the stable wormhole links between point-to-point devices like jump gates have been developed using the so-called exotic entangled reaction transmission principle. So, what we have is in where'd I go? So by 2018, you know, we have some development. This is like early Triglavian invasion stuff. Right? Wait, no, because this isn't even Triglavian invasion stuff. This is just understanding Triglavian technology leads to this. This leads to them being able to develop these new gates. What's important about this is, remember, like prior to this, stargates required very intense analysis and mapping of space-time in order to find decent landing points, or like decent harmonization points for the two gates to be able to connect them. What this does is it kind of bootstraps that whole process, where rather than having to find where things connect, they can use this Triglavian conduit connection system to kind of open the wormhole that they can then stabilize and utilize, right? And so what's interesting about this is that I have long since argued that the Stargate Trailblazer project was an extension to this, right? So, let's see. In 2021, sorry, in YC121, which is 2019, we see Ishikone Corporation meeting with, this is actually related, this is a little bit unrelated, kind of, maybe, but if you remember, during the invasions, there was the Sorrow Concord guys tried to attack Arydanika Research Consortium, the player organization, because of their 20,000 Triglavian trinary samples. And it was actually Ishikone specifically that steps forward and argues that they shouldn't be able to do that. And Ishikone kind of shows that they've been interested in some of this stuff, including the Roadrunner virus and the semi-key stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on right here. I've been having to pull apart this stuff in the this morning, and I haven't quite picked out all of it yet, but we can see that there was interest by Ishikone specifically in this Triglavian research, right? And potentially keeping it out of Concord's hands. And we also see that Wiakomi comes in and is connected to the dealing with the virus, the computer, the semi-key virus and everything that was going on. Almost certainly related to this, but I don't have enough to go into that right now. Next, in 2019-625, we see that why did I pull this? Oh yeah, so by 2020, this is also the same time that we have now, we have forces positive to Lydai, supporting Lydai, attempting to raid Intaki and being kind of thwarted by Ishikone. I didn't really cover this before, but Ishikone won the rights to own Intaki back in like 2010. And so when Lydai was doing their reparations or whatever and looting all the stuff, which led to their own microcontrollers or nanocontrollers being developed, it was Ishikone that was kind of mad about it, right? But also, I think there's more here, right? No, maybe not. Either way. And then here we see more stuff about Lydai forces on Intaki 5. Continued fighting between Ishikone and Lydai when it comes to this tech. We also see Hasiota, Ishikone, and Wiakome mega corporations form Combined TNR Corporate Alliance. So this is when Combined TNR, which is one of the three major factions, gets created within the Caldari. So this is the Ocean Winds Corporate Community, which is a direct response to PKN Interstellar, which is CBD, Nwegahuvi, and Lydai corporations. So one of the things I'm trying to point out to you guys today, maybe poorly, is that Lydai and Ishikone do not like each other. Like anywhere where you go through the lore, there's pretty much disagreements going on between Lydai and Ishikone. Especially when it comes to these subcranial nanocontrollers versus transcranial microcontrollers, right? And the development of it and the economics of it. Because remember, transcranial microcontrollers are one of the major like building blocks of Ishikone's current wealth and production line, right? So yeah. So the Combined TNR is formed during this like period of tension, right? Next, we have when the governor of the Amadar Mandate is elevated to holder rank, we also, this is in November of YC121, so still 2019, we have where is it? Hasiota, Ishikone, and Wiakome negotiators meet Samatar Shakur to discuss opening Matari commodities market to Combine TNR traders. So already, even back in 2019, we have the Combine TNR guys trying to reach out to the Minmatar specifically, right? We have some people with agreements with the Amar, but right now they're trying to make an agreement with the Minmatar, which echoes later on in a few years when the Caldari and the Minmatar become much closer allies. This really supports Hasiota, Ishikone, and Wiakome's kind of direction that they've been going, right? And that's important because one of the things that's a big piece here is that Ishikone and Combine TNR have really been racking up the wins in the last few years without anybody really noticing. So then we go to YC122, which is 2020-0308, where we have we have Concord Assembly authorizes release of new investment tranche for fortifications from New Eden Defense Fund as SEC reports increased revenues. So SEC is getting increased revenues from taxes that is paying for Edencom and Concord projects, in particular the New Eden Defense Fund. This is important in a bit. So one of the big pieces to all of this, I know we're going to be jumping around a little bit, but we'll get to it but like, so if you remember during the Shadow Wars, there was Othanoon, and like there's this question of like, what are the Triglavians working on? What tech the Triglavians are working on? And a lot of the Triglavian tech was discovered during that time, and specifically the tech that was discovered by the Caldari was novel transportation technology. In other words, the ability to teleport people, right? This of course becomes the Shipcaster eventually, but that's just an application of that technology. The truth is that the Triglavians have been working on this technology for quite some time. They too have been doing intense amounts of research and study as to this nature of space-time, right? A lot of their original world arcs were doing tons and tons of analysis of local space-time topology and their ability to influence it, right? And the big result of all of this was that there were several new facilities that were being disappeared. Triglavian raiding party depopulates colonial settlements on S-3, reports towns stripped of biological matter on a molecular level. And then a little bit later, we see authorities mystified as population of S-3 town discovered in Triglavian environmental facility on Gunai 2. The Scope Galactic Hour with Ret Gloriax can exclusively reveal the population of the town of New Concept and Smith 3 are alive and apparently relatively well. After detecting strange signals emanating from the storm world of Gunai 2, Concord Aegis Division discovered a bizarre environment maintained on the rocky surface of the inhospitable planet. With the heavily protected environment where the population of New Concept colony so recently believed to have been reduced to their constituent molecules by Triglavian raid on the 8th of March. So basically, it seems that the Triglavians have teleported people from one location to another location, and that's a big piece of what they've been working on. Motivations of the Triglavians, it's not my role to speculate. I'm a soldier charged with organizing the elements in defense of New Eden. Our forces responded to a threat that by the good grace were able to save lives throughout the thought lost. They're all completely unharmed. I cannot say. I'm afraid I'm unwilling to discuss the individual cases. Sufficient to say that Triglavian methods of intelligence gathering can be taxing to the subject. We've seen this sort of thing before on a smaller scale. Yes, I'd say that the Triglavians are adapting their approach as the invasion campaign continues. They remain a dire threat to New Eden, and so forth. So the Triglavians are working on teleportation technology at this point. We also see in these stories, we're going to see a lot of stories about the Guristas. And when we see the Guristas, I would like to remind people that the former CEO of Ishikone, the guy who got killed by the broker, the guy Ortro Goryushi, was a Guristas pirate member. And so I'm not saying whether or not the Guristas are absolutely on the side of Ishikone, but one of the things I kept running into as I was building this narrative this morning was how often the Guristas were attacking Lydai specifically. I'm not like there is no real smoking gun that the Guristas are directly working with Ishikone, but if you like lay out their prospects, everything a lot of the things that the Guristas do happen to be to the advantage of Combine TNR and to the disadvantage of PKN Interstellar. So that's something to keep in mind. All right. So then we get Edencom being formed in 2020, which includes comments about the different environmental experiments that were being done. The previous election is ongoing during this time. And the Chalkade stuff happens. Also, the mega corporations convene second CEP summit to consider reconsolidation of corporate interests within state. And oh boy, it's the ghost ship dispute. We're just going to ignore that one too for now. So this comes to the release of one of the biggest products made by PKN. Now, PKN did the HyperNet. They also did a lot of the renovations when it came to Concord, but then they also come out with expert systems. And expert systems are a big key to all of this because it uses the where is it? Is it here? Hold on. Is it here? Based on clone gelbling and skill injector technology. Ah, yeah. Together with Lidai's subcranial nanocontroller technology. So basically, during these whole raids of during the whole raids on wait, hold on. Yeah. On sorry. After the raids on Intaki by Lidai, within a few months, they come out with these subcranial nanocontrollers, which become like their new technology and is their counter to the Ishikone's transcranial microcontrollers. So you have the subcranial nanocontrollers, which are the newer version, the cheap version made by Lidai, which is designed to be a response to the transcranial microcontrollers that they probably developed by stealing technology from the Intaki. But it ultimately surfaces as the core technology behind expert systems. Okay, so Lidai is making a big step forward with their development at the expense of Ishikone in a large way, right as the time that like the invasions are wrapping up. They're still reacting to things like the taking of the systems, the formation of Pochvin, etc., etc. Actually, no, this isn't even when it's done. Like the Triglavian invasions are still ongoing, if I remember correctly. So then, shortly thereafter, like so, we have when they've announced their new technology, PKN. We have that on the 310 YC123. So by the next month, we get that protests are starting to break out within the Galente or within the Caldari state, following a broadcast by the Guristas pirates. So the Guristas pirates come in and they post these reports that show Lidai Protective Service troops brutally suppressing a protest at the time, which kicks off a whole bunch of protests and riots and stuff within, basically accusing Lidai and their protection services of being too hostile. This protest is kind of engulfs the entire Caldari state, especially given the fact that they've been receiving tons of losses during the invasion. It was a very bad time for the Caldari during the invasions. We have Lidai Extractive Industries runs Silva as a standard pattern underground, blah, blah, blah. Lidai itself has condemned the video as fake and the broadcast as criminal subversion aimed at destabilizing the Caldari state. Once again, it's very interesting that the Guristas are specifically targeting Lidai and their allies. The facade of unity, usually maintained by the mega corporations of the chief executive panel, has continued to be placed under great strain by these latest events. Lidai, CBD, and NOH allies of the so-called forest factions have backed this line that the videos of Gurista fabrication. Kaliota and Sugavesta of the mountain faction has restricted themselves to issues of calling for workers to disperse and condemning Gurista's criminality. However, the Hasiota, Ishikone, and Wiakome corporations of the Ocean faction has authorized their workers to assemble in corporate plazas and settlement squares, firmly ordering their security forces to restrict themselves to protection of the corporate property and vandalism. Additionally, Wiakome Senior Executive Director for Infrastructure Security, Akimaka Saraki, or Akimaka, yeah, or whatever, has declared that the Caldari people have a clear and ancient right to protest incompetence and malfeasance among the executive classes and ordered the Wiakome Peace Corps to protect Wiakome corporate citizens from criminal abuses. Director Saraki's remarks echo comments made by his father-in-law, Akari Setura, the former CEO of Wiakome Seatoa, whatever, Heavy Industries during the Caldari protests of YC122. So this protest kicks off. More protests kick off, largely because of what the Guristas have demonstrated, and the Ocean faction kind of step in as this reasonable, hey guys, we should let people protest thing, right? As opposed to the more hardline crackdowns of Lidai and them, making Lidai look bad, right? And then we get... oh yeah, this is all the same time as like Derail and Ugalis is going on. All these things are all happening at the same time. Yeah. So then in April 28th, which was the next day, we have the Tenu attack. So this is in this environment, the dread attacks begin. Okay, if you remember, there's the various dread attacks that eventually is outed as being part of the EOM, but they go on for several weeks and put a lot of tension across the cluster between the different empires. Caldari State delegation invited to Satellite Summit at Imperial Privy Council, Dan Torzad, Amar Prime. The Imperial Chamberlain Office has confirmed that the Caldari State has been invited to send a delegation to the Satellite Summit to be held in parallel with the meeting of the full Privy Council. Caldari State has confirmed that Senior Executive Director Aki Makasaraki of the Wiakome Corporation has led the delegation in his capacity as the official substitute for the CEO of the Wiakome as current Caldari Inner Circle delegate. So at this point in time, the Inner Circle for Concord, I believe, is being executed by Aki Makasaraki. Okay. And at this same time, Celis Agard and them start doing their analysis of Solitude, and they start doing a survey, right? This goes back to that whole thing where it's like, well, in order to be able to make Stargates, you have to do intense surveying of the space-time topology of that area in order to figure out where to build the Stargate, right? So we say, President Agard confirms that she's recently authorized the Federation Navy Stellar Survey Corps to carry out new surveys in Solitude, Placid, and Verge Vendor regions with a view of determining the best location for a mooted direct Stargate connection between Solitude and the other regions of the Galente Federation. At present, Stargate traffic must take a dangerous route through Syndicate region. So basically, they're trying to build this Stargate, right? Between Solitude and the rest of Galente space, right? And this becomes the Stargate Trailblazer demonstration, or like project, right? But each of the empires get their own Stargate, but only the Galente are known to have been doing the research, and they use the Trace Cosmos as a way of kind of understanding space-time better to be able to build these gates, right? We also see Garistas Pirates release financial records showing undisclosed payments by CBD, LADI, and NOH executives. So Garistas still twisting that screw, right? Trying to create more protests. Caldari Business Tribunal declines to comment and claims PKN Interstellar overcharged for Jita 44 project. So there's this growing conspiracy theory that rises that the reason why the Caldari state did so poorly against the Triglavians was because the Caldari Navy Veteran Society breaks silence to express outrage at misdirection of funds from the defense of the state. So the argument was that in the middle of the Triglavian invasions, money was shunted away from the Caldari Navy to line the pockets of PKN Interstellar, so LIDI, CBD, and NOH. And one of the major ways that they did this is through the Jita 44 renovation project. Okay, that is the claim, right? And that's what kind of gets everybody super mad. But nobody really has a bunch of time to pay attention to this because all these dread attacks start happening, right? So then we have 2 days later, the Tanu and Jinarfa attacks have been finished. And we get Caldari State megacorporations impose security lockdowns during cluster-wide emergency. New Caldari Prime, the Caldari State Chief Executive Panel has issued orders imposing lockdowns across all state and corporate territories with the effect of restricting assembly and travel within and between corporate territories. The vast majority of corporate citizens are believed to be complying with the orders, given the alarming escalation of tensions between the core empires in recent days. However, some worker protests have continued, with a number of activists pointing out the promised reforms and refits by the Caldari Navy are proceeding slowly. Fears of the Caldari state being overwhelmed in the event of the wider war are very real, according to sources within the executive tiers of some mega corporation security forces. Protests have also focused on the claims of the Garistas Pirates that senior executives of the CBD, LIDI, and NOH megacorporations have benefited from, quote, undisclosed payments varying from confidential corporate businesses or bonuses skimming contracts, shares of smuggling projects, and outright bribery. The Guristas have released a raft of financial records that purport to come from a variety of megacorporate and subsidiary sources. A few records indicate relationships between criminal gangs and even the Guristas pirates, particularly in the case of executives alleged to have ordered security operations against worker protests. So Guristas are outright claiming that the tough crackdown on the protesters was arranged by CBD, LIDI, and NOH with shady parties in order to make it happen, and here's the evidence for it, right? The Pecan Interstellar Consortium of CBD, LIDI, and NOH has strenuously denied the reports as authentic, accusing the Guristas of perpetuating a vast fraud and massive forgery aimed at destabilizing the state, destroying the prosperity of all Caldari workers. NOH Internal Security Corporation is reported to have carried out raids against a number of corporate barracks alleged to be centers for the distribution of fake reports. Security forces of CBD and LIDI are believed to have begun their own information terrorism investigations. And we see also let's see. I think that's it for this one. So then we have 1 month later, well, really only a few days later, because this is the end of April, at the beginning of March 3rd, YC123, which is 2021. We have the explosion at the CEP Spire. So this is in the middle of the dread attacks. There's a explosion at the CEP Spire, which is of course the chief executive panel. This is where Pook Kosainen becomes incapacitated, and so they do not have a chairman for the CEP as of this point in time, right? With everything else happening, this happens. So then, as the dreads continue, the Minmatar Republic presents information that it's actually the EOM Doomsday cult behind the dread attacks. And we see here that the Caldari State delegate Akimaka Saraki stated that the position of the Caldari State is that the evidence shows a clear trail of the Equilibrium of Mankind cult, and our own investigators are pursuing a theory of cult terrorist infiltration into the Expert Innovation Mercenary Corporation. So that's kind of like he's just being friendly in that scenario. But then we also see Caldari State corporate territories under heavy security lockdown after new Caldari Prime attack. The Caldari State remains in a widespread and severe security lockdown. Its corporate territories following the attack on the Chief Executive Panel Administrative Spire that destroyed the top 7 upper levels of the building. The CEP chairman is still missing and believed to be among the thousands of casualties inflicted by the bustling HQ of Caldari State's governing body. The Caldari State peacekeepers and megacorporation security forces have been carrying out extensive security sweeps, and a large number of locations across corporate territories have been raided. The ruling Big 8 megacorporations have continued to hold emergency meetings with the CEP over the remote holographic links, and Caldari naval forces are on high alert. Worker protest groups have been mostly complied with the current state of the emergency, but few have protested allegedly heavy-handed and brutal security actions by NOH Internal Security and LIDI Protection Services. So once again, still protest with NOH and LIDI being made to look like the bad guys in all of this, right? Right as the head of the CEP gets taken out mysteriously in the middle of these dread attacks. So then, really before we can do anything else, we see the beginning of Stargate Trailblazer, right? So new Stargate constructions begin, right? And so we see in Ulai Genesis, new Stargate construction efforts are underway in locations across New Eden following a signing of a new treaty between Concord powers, providing the funding, navigation rights, and trade agreements relevant to the new links. Negotiations between the four core empires and Concord are understood to have been carried out in some secrecy over the last few months, owing to the political situation in several of the empires being fraught, as one source close to the process puts it. So this is important because this actually implies that in YC123.05.27 there were emergency Concord intercouncil meetings. We saw some details about that earlier, but now we see that there have been meetings, and a big piece of this meeting is surrounding the development of these new stargates. It's promoted mostly by the Gallente Federation. They're the only empire to have openly signaled its intent to build a new stargate as a direct connection between Solitude region. However, we see the other core empires have been known to at least been exploring various mooted Stargate projects, with the most anticipated being the restoration of a direct civilian Stargate link between the Amarr Empire and the Caldari State. With the loss of the Amarr system to Nyarja to the Driglavian Collective, the previous link has been severed, and a new program of surveying for viable new links have evidently, supposedly, been carried out by both the Empire and State. It is reported that many previous viable connections from the Caldari State to Amarr Empire have become dangerously unstable, apparently an effect of the large number of systems in Caldari territory affected by the Triglavian stellar manipulation. A link between Haikota of the Forge and Abazon in Genesis has been established as the best candidate, and work is now underway in both systems. We also see that the low-set gate to Stain gets made, and of course Mimitar makes their gate between their territory of Metropolis and Genesis, which has its own, historical noteworthiness, which isn't overly important to right now. What we do know is that there was this big treaty. Sources with knowledge of the Concord Inner Circle negotiations on the Stargates Enabling Treaty, SEC Oversight, Navigation, and Funding, YC123, has confirmed that the Gallente Federation strongly backed the use of New Eden Defense Fund, the use of the New Eden Defense Fund as a source of general financing for the SEC elements of the project for a large grant for the Mimitar Republic. The Amarr Empire conditioned its support that a measure of the alleviation of existing sanctions on all traffic. The Caldari State agreed on the condition of a similar grant for its own Stargate project. So everybody's basically saying, yeah, we'll do it if you give us money from the New Eden Defense Fund, right? Which was created in order to help finance the defense and restoration of facilities thanks to the Triglavian invasion, right? So blah blah blah. And then Caldari State megacorporations maintain state of emergency as CP remains deadlocked. New Caldari Prime, the Caldari State emergency measures in the wake of the new Caldari Prime CP bombings continue to be in effect of the aftermath of the terrorist attacks remain unresolved. Despite having multiple off-site and off-world clone backups, Kasainen has not returned to his post due to recovery of his living body from the wreckage of the CP Spire. In an apparent fluke, the chair survived the bombing but is reportedly in a deep coma. While Kasainen is reported as likely to recover after extensive therapy, the irony of his survival preventing a backup clone activation has real effects on the Caldari State. So they do not have a leader at this point, or at least they don't have a chairman. The big 8 microcorporations are reported to be in a deadlock as to a way forward for the CEP, with powerful mountain faction of Kalikiota and Sukavesta apparently undecided between themselves as to who to back for a provincial or even new permanent CEP chair. The diametrically opposed Ocean, Ishikone, Hasiota, and Wiakomi, and Forest, CBD, Lidai, and NOH factions lack the votes to push their own favored candidates. Reports of incidents involving rioter vandalism and corporate security abuses continue to be exchanged by workers and executive groups on various Caldari State communications channels despite a state of emergency, adding to a widespread sense that the Big 8 have lost control. So, there's no leader. There's protests. Those protests are largely surrounded around CBD, Lidai, and NOH. The argument is that Lidai, NOH, and CBD are messing up. They're misappropriating funds. They're mistreating their citizens. And the Ocean faction, Ishikone, Hasiota, and Wikomi, are kind of presenting themselves as the good guys in this situation. Which, remember, again, Ishikone has direct ties to the Guristas, which are one of the main people that have been validating the claims against CBD, Lidai, and NOH that has caused all of this unrest in the first place. Okay. Also, we see... I promise you, this is relevant. So even here, the Guristas tie up 20 EOM operatives and deliver them to the DED. They're the good guys, right? And then at the same time, we see the signs of the beginning of the Deathless Circle's expansion and rise to power going on at the same time. Workers' organizations in Caldari State accused of receiving stolen scripts from Garistus by Lydai Corporation. Just more of this nonsense. Yep, we're getting there. Hold on. Okay, so now the new Stargates have opened, right? The Stargate Trailblazer system has shown up. These new Stargates are made, and the Chief Executive Panel agreed to appoint Akimaka Saraki as acting chairman. And we know that like he's now just full on the chairman, right? He still is the chairman of the CEP as of today, right? So here we go. The appointment of acting chair Saraki is a coup for the ocean factions of Ahasiota, Ishikone, and Wiakome corporations, representing a deal that saw the mountain faction of Kalikyoto Sukavesta agree to back the appointee from the Wiakome corporation. So, you know, Ishikone, who's been mad at Lydai, might have worked with the Garistus to discredit Lydai and his friends. Meanwhile, Wiakome and their dude has been offering the more sensible path forward, and eventually now becomes the chairman of the CEP, the effective head, sort of head that there are of the Caldari state. So Saraki was notable in helping avert the major conflict due to the equilibrium of mankind crisis. His service during the Triglavian invasion has also held a distinct advantage. His role of overseeing the fortifications of Wiakome buildings in the Seminudi system and personal command of the planetary defense of the sixth planet, contributing to the successful repulsion of Triglavian forces. He is the son-in-law of Akari Satura, retired CEO of the Wiakome Satura Heavy Industries, a member of the dynasty that controls the Wiakome Mega Corporation. Akari has been outspoken in his acknowledgement of the basis for worker grievances during the unrest within the state, and Saraki is known to be sympathetic to those outraged by the failings of the military and corporate security forces. So it's almost as if they built these protests just so Saraki could come in and solve them, right? Okay, so is Ishikone up to anything? The appointment of Saraki as the CEP chair may indicate the Ocean faction has persuaded the stability and security-oriented Mountain faction to take a path of reform, reconciliation with the aggrieved worker populations. Regardless of whether that is so, the Forest faction has undoubtedly been dealt a blow and may have to tread carefully in order to avoid the Ocean Mountain axis solidifying into a permanent alliance. And then do we have anything else? More stuff about the formation of the pirate network that would eventually become the Deathless Circle. More stuff, and then stuff about illegal war clones and stuff. It's important to note that a lot of this lore that we're going on right here, we are well within CCP trying to set up the lore for the shooter, right? A lot of this stuff is all kind of details that might relate to the shooter, which will be important when we piece it all together. All right, next we have by July 26th, Inner Circle Security Summit reduces Eden.com funding. Okay, so this is actually kind of where my exploration of this whole thing started, right? Because if we go all the way back to the very end of the story, right? If we go all the way back to this new region of space, right? They say that all of this began in an inner circle meeting in YC123, and it starts with Air bringing this idea to Concord. Right? It specifically says, when Air first approached us with this plan, we agreed that it would be important to select stars that would not be so desirable that they would become a new frontier for conflict. So in YC123, which is that time that we are currently walking our way through in the lore, that is supposedly when this whole project began. Okay, so we have, going back to where we were at. The reason why this is important is because this plus the previous secret meeting are the only inner circle summits that I was able to find happening in YC123. How can even CSP even dare to create a shooter that compete with other? Focus on the main product, please. I mean, it's an expansion of the main product, I would say. Okay, so here we have Inner Circle slashes the income of the New Eden Defense Fund and deadlocks over militia warzone peacekeeping while tensions escalate in occupied territories. So the Inner Circle agrees to provision reduction in the funding provided to the New Eden Defense Fund via general taxation across the big core empires and associated territories, despite a strong appeal to maintain centralized funding levels from Edencom Provost Marshal Kasia Valkanir. Delegates from empires were insistent on changes in an unusual show of unanimity. Reports from sources close to the negotiations suggest that the consensus for reducing New Eden Defense Fund income is a case of disparate state interests aligning behind a particular measure rather than an example of warming interstellar relations. In particular, the Amar Empire and Galente Federation have both shown signs of increasing impatience with a large burden placed on their economies with the New Eden Defense Fund and New Eden Common Defense Initiative. Domestic outlays of the infrastructure and military spending has increased considerably in recent months for the two largest star empires. The Galente Federation has been embarked on a large program of public works focused on the periphery districts, while also accelerating military recruitment and rebuilding in the need to address more traditional threats, reasserting itself in the aftermath of the Triglavian invasion. The Amar Empire has also been spending vast sums of its own military rebuilding program while pursuing a major security crackdown on heretics and dissidents. For their own part, the Caldari State and Mimitar Republic have been strong critics in the way in which the New Eden Defense Fund Edencom has been administered, particularly in terms of the balancing of fortifications along the Empire borders. The Mimitar Republic has previously stated its concerns that Edencom has become a means for aggressive state actors to advance their military objectives, consolidate gains contrary to the Uli Accords, in a formula that is understood by all as an accusation of Edencom's partiality of the Amar Empire. The Caldari State is chafed under the funding agreement since the Triglavian invasions resulted in disastrous loss of systems, and the Edencom policy has come in for heavy criticism for the mega corporations keen to offer disgruntled Caldari citizens an alternative target for their outrage. Edencom fortification and defense operations have also done little to address the heavily disruption of Caldari space by Triglavian raiders, prompting acting CEP chair Aki Makasaraki to personally instruct Caldari delegation to vote for funding reductions. Okay, so as war is starting to pick up, we see the cutting of funding through the New Eden Common Defense Initiative. And we also see this is when the Garissus raid happens, right? Caldari authorities have alleged that the Garissus pirates were behind a weekend raid on the House of Records information center in the Arcturus system. This raid is believed to have penetrated several secure data vaults in the facility. Concord sources have confirmed that a number of disruptive raids were also mounted on several Concord stations in the system. DED investigators are reported to view the raids on Concord stations as a distraction mounted while the main Garissus infiltration force quietly penetrated the House of Records vaults. While the Chief Executive Panel has ordered a full inventory of the data held by the Arcturus House of Records archive, there has been no comment from the organization itself. Informed sources have claimed that the staff from Archive K has arrived in Arcturus to oversee the House of Records investigation. Archive K has long been rumored to be a secret intelligence and security branch of the House of Records. And then also we see all this stuff about illegal AIs, especially connected to, LIDI protection services operating within Ugali. It's not that LIDI has the illegal AIs, but they're kind of working in tandem with this because it's the whole Ugali situation. And we also see that, who Quaif has close connections to? We talk about how Quaif Corporation has close connections to the Caldari, but what we can actually see by these investigations is that specifically the Quaif Corporation has very strong ties to LIDI and their friends. Right, so Quaif is connected to the Forest faction. Almost every single time we see Quaif acting, we see them connected to the Forest faction. Yeah. That's it for that. We'll talk about the shooter another time. I'm trying to get through this. I don't want to get too distracted, okay? So the House of Records gets raided on the 26th of July. And then on the next day, we see the big security breach leads to financial chaos and epic bank heist by the Charistus Raiders. This is when, if you remember, everybody got ISK given to them via the login rewards. It's also where the SEC reserve bank keys start to become available. The Charistus raid on SEC secure key storage and ESS vaults are believed to have made off with trillions of ISK, value financial data, and security access codes. Security analysts have speculated that a series of recent raids by the Charistus have been a prelude to his grand heist, allowing them to assemble a picture of certain locations, procedures, and vital protocols ahead of the massive raids. So, significant blow to the SEC, a member of Concord. Lidai Mega Corporation condemns Charistus as common thieves, liars, and swindlers. Upwell assures people that there's limited exposure to breaches. That's it for that. Okay, so in this world, at this moment, this is the moment, right? So tensions have been going on everywhere. Fundings have been shifted around. The New Eden Defense Fund was first plundered and used to pay for all of these new Stargates, and then their funding was slashed. There's all these breaches within Concord by the Charistus. The Charistus have exposed all this information about various different Caldari megacorporations, especially the Forest faction, which results in protests and riots and a bombing, which does a handover of control over the CEP to the Ocean faction. All this happening, leading us to the Association for the Interdisciplinary Research makes its public debut, August 20th, YC123. And what's interesting about this is that this is the end of the year almost, right? If we if we go to New Eden News, we can go to YC123, and we can see that, the Association for Interdisciplinary Research makes its public review. There's the Capsuleer in Caldari Union Day. There's some rogue drone activity airing Concord, which we'll look at. And then Anniversary of Pochvin, and then we're done. There isn't really a good opportunity for AIR to have this inter-council meeting that they supposedly refer to in this talk, right? So this inner circle meeting. But we've already had two secret inner circle meetings, one of which ended up with the Stargate project, where Stargates were built that were supposedly mapped, but are larger connections and different kinds of connections and more convenient connections than any other Stargates that have ever been built by the Empires, as far as we know. Okay? So all of this stuff is going on at the same time. And we see here, in a press release sent to media outlets on behalf of AIR CEO Belligerent and CEO Ojala, the corporation lays bare its ambitions. The Association for Interdisciplinary Research is proud to announce its debut into the New Eden corporate landscape by pioneering groundbreaking technologies. AIR seeks to disrupt the status quo for the benefit of all mankind. Our philosophy is one of radical independence. We believe that the science beyond the borders of empires, where others see limits, AIR sees possibilities. The statement elaborates the corporation's immediate plans, including the simultaneous launch of AIR Laboratories, a subdivision of AIR focused on scientific research and development across multiple industries, and the AIR Capsuleer Training Program. The program, overseen by AIR Laboratories, claims to provide aspiring pilots with everything that you need to become successful Capsuleers, from the acquisition of necessary skills to developing their long-term career goals. In response to the Scope's request for additional comment, AIR's VP of Operations Vesper Calatrix said, in order to democratize the notoriously expensive Capsuleer conversion process, AIR will cover the cost of all necessary training and medical screening for qualified aspirants. AIR espouses the notion that the vast reaches of space exist for the enjoyment and exploration of all, regardless of one's socioeconomic status. AIR was founded by two entrepreneurs who split from their respective corporations to create their own, Belligerent of the Sisters of Eve and Ojala of the Ishikone Corporation. Inquiries within both SOE and Ishikone confirmed that Belligerent and Ojala departed from these organizations in good standing. Those corporate connections appear to have proved integral to kickstarting AIR's research projects. Combine TNR promotional simulation of AIR research development. According to publicly accessible development plans, Combine TNR, the Caldari corporate consortium of which Ishikone is a member, is assisting in the rapid construction of several AIR stations across the cluster. Additionally, the Sisters of Eve confirmed to Scope that they will provide these new AIR facilities with equipment vital to AIR Laboratories operations. Quote, the Sisters of Eve are thrilled to see our former colleague Belligerent make a splash with the public launch of AIR. We wish her the best in all of her endeavors and look forward to collaborating with AIR in the future. Although sources of the for part of this new corporation's funding can be gleaned through public filings with the Secure Commerce Commission (SEC), the available documentation leaves a significant chunk of AIR's monetary wealth unaccounted for. A representative for the SEC responds to Scope inquiry with a terse no comment. While it remains to be seen how far AIR's sphere of influence extends, one thing is certain: the competition in New Eden's corporate sector is about to heat up. Caldari state authorities and mega corporations preparing for state workers. Blah blah blah. Sukavista Sukavista secures the contract to rebuild the CEP Spire. Combine TNR, Hasioda, Ishikone, and Wakome sign agreement with the Caldari Navy to upgrade fleet reserves. Lidai contests Combine TNR colonial development claim over Intaki system on behalf of PK and Interstellar. Raid on Anjinin Garissa's hideout by Intara Direct Action, which is part of connected to the Lidai group. Nets billions in corporate script transactions. And is there anything else that's interesting in this? Okay, and then we see Inner Circle to review Edencom operations across New Eden as reduced funding puts organization under increased scrutiny. But Concord's derail anti-AI division given increased funding following successes of recent operations and increased AI threats. And yeah. And so then Caldari Union Day occurs. And we get a little bit of an update that we can poke in on. Hold on. We're going to jump into the second half of this because it starts out with the nullsec stuff, which isn't as important to right now.
Away. Caldari State Workers Union Day is being celebrated all over Caldari space, with the festivities expected to last a week. The big 8 megacorporations that control the Caldari State are also displaying the might of their security forces with fleet parades in key systems. Caldari Union Day also sees the unveiling of 2 monuments. The Landfall Kutuotomiru Orbital Center is a facility dedicated to the teaching and practice of the various techniques of mind and body used by those practicing the Caldari Way, a practice held in high regard by the Caldari people, intended to maximize focus, equanimity, and mental fortitude for one's individual efforts to climb the corporate ladders. More controversially, the ruling megacorporations have also unveiled a memorial to the dead of the Urlan II riots, in which ethnic Galante citizens of the state were killed by provost rioters loyal to the former regime of Tibus Heth. The corporations of the state have long worked to discredit centralized government and ideology of Heth and the provosts. However, outside observers of Caldari corporate politics have noted that this latest memorial to victims of that regime comes at a time when the megacorporations are themselves under pressure from Caldari worker classes. With megacorporation politics under the closest public scrutiny since the fall of Heth, and the Caldari state still recovering from its grievous losses to the Triglavian invaders, the State Industrial Planning Summit traditionally held on Union Day is expected to deal with many pressing issues. Uppermost on the agenda of the Chief Executive Panel is the decision on the next permanent chair of the CEP. With Chairman Puak Kosonen still recovering from near death in the new Caldari Prime CEP Spire bombing, the acting chair has been Akimaka Saraki, a Navy veteran and rising star of the Wyarchemy Corporation. All indications are that the successful performance of Chairman Saraki during his tenure as stand-in will result in the CEP confirming him in the leadership position permanently. Akimaka Saraki first emerged onto the public stage within the state as a senior director within the Wyarchemy Corporation responsible for infrastructure security. Saraki played a key role in the effort to fortify the planets of Samanuni's system against Triglavian invasion. When the system itself was invaded, Saraki took personal command of the planetary defense of Samanuni 6 as the highest-ranking corporate leader with military experience. Saraki's role as a voice supporting the right of Caldari citizens to protest corporate malfeasance and incompetence cemented his reputation as a relatively liberal while patriotic figure at home. As an envoy to Concord, Saraki was also able to assist in averting open war during the EOM terror crisis. Shortly after this, with Puak Kosonen disabled by his injuries, the CEP appointed Akimaka Saraki as acting chair of the CEP, elevating him to the leadership of the Caldari state. With Akimaka Saraki's confirmation as chair of the CEP all but guaranteed, it is expected that at a future time, the new head of the corporate ruling body will address the citizens of the Caldari state. Many are expecting an address to come within weeks, possibly during the period making a year since the Triglavian invasions ended. With the big 8 megacorporations determined to reassert the efficient running of the state under their rule, the choice of Chairman Akimaka Saraki is clearly a compromise between the competing corporate factions. With a patriotic yet relatively liberalizing slant of the Wyarchemy Corporation's Ocean faction reflected in their nominee, and with the agreement of the conservative and powerful Mountain faction corporations, it is clear that the majority of the CEP aim at consolidation and reconciliation with aggrieved Caldari populations, rather than continued confrontation and coercion as advocated by the more militant corporations of the Forest faction. This is Alton Havery reporting for The Scope.
So hopefully that kind of put together a lot of the pieces that I've been trying to get through with all of this. The only other thing that I would point out is that so they're talking about how the other piece that's happening on all this is like Tybus Heth. Tybus Heth actually came out of the Calichiota Corporation. So the Calichiota and Sukavesta corporations are like the two biggest mega corporations. They should be pretty strong, but you know, Calichiota's been kind of on the back foot ever since Heth. And so I find it interesting that like, so the Heth monuments being brought up or being put up here, or like the monument against, like in honor against the people that were killed by Heth's like stuff. And so it almost feels like with everything going on with the Garistas, with the Lydai and all them, that makes them weak. And it's like Sukavesta and Calichiota have to decide who they're going to back. And then the Ocean faction are like, hey, you know, if you back us, we can help like kind of redeem you a little bit. Wouldn't it be unfortunate if everybody thought about Tybus Heth when they think of you, especially with all these protests? And so in this state, the Caldari agree to install Akimaka Saraki, Akimaka Saraki, there you go, as like the head of the Caldari state. Making sure that the Ocean faction kind of becomes the strongest faction within the Caldari corporate world, right? And remember, so the other thing we just learned was that the Ocean faction, what did they do? They got the air development contract. All of the air facilities are built by Combine TNR. We were talking the other day, somebody was mentioning, it's like, oh, you know, the new Stargate that's being built in Uli, right? We're going to head there real quick and look at it. It was pointed out like, oh, that's a Caldari Stargate. all of this stuff is like they use Caldari towers for Edencom stuff, or in these cases and stuff. And this is actually why. It's not just a random thing that Caldari was selected. It's the fact that these facilities are being built specifically by the Ocean faction. The Ocean like things that are built for air are being built by the Ocean faction, because air is tightly connected to Ishikone and the SOE, right? So, yeah. So that's why this Stargate is Caldari. That's why these towers are Caldari. And of course, you know, we see the air bowheads here too. So that's a very interesting piece to all of this. It actually makes sense that they use Caldari Stargates for the air stuff, because it's made by the Ocean faction. Back to this. So, hold on. Gotta make sure I'm still cloaked. Okay, so. Yeah, it is pretty cool, huh? All right. So then we have, that's the Union Day, and then we have the anniversary of the formation of Pochvin. Oh, wait. Do we have anything in the notes here? I think, did we check? Ishikone Corporation confirms Combined TNR Consortium project to construct air laboratory stations on track. Caldari State Worker Union announces increased budget for intercorporation worker solidarity trips. Quaife Corporation defends involvement in PKN Interstellar Consortium as Senate investigation into Warzone activities continues. Again, Quaife continues to be connected to PKN. Caldari House of Records refused comment on Caldari whistleblower claims of involvement in Edencom diplomacy with Triglavians. Okay, so maybe that's something about the House of Records and Archive K. There was other stuff about Edencom and Triglavian diplomacy before. All right, and then we get the 1-year anniversary of Pochvin. So this is like the next month, right? Yeah, so 1 month later. Seriatim Foucault gives his little speech. Edencom memorial to Triglavian invasion established orbit of Ulai star marks losses of Triglavian collective. Declassified complex of Edencom installation near Ulai star includes invasion command headquarters and stellar monitoring facility. Sorry. Leak of report of Caldari Navy scouts supporting Como resistance movement describes diplomatic ships visiting Perun proving grounds. Ulai Diplomatic Committee closes ranks to deny wild rumors related to extensive contact between the Triglavian Collective and Pochvin. Inner Circle reviews authorization to deploy Aegis boarding units in counter-subversion operations. And that, I think, is it for that. And then we have Scope, Rogue Drone Activity, Air, and Concord. So, Air Laboratories Station fully operational. Investigation and attacks conclude. Hold on, let's watch this one.
Rogue drone infestations are reported to be on the increase across New Eden, according to Concord sources. The reason for the increasing rate of infestation remains unknown, together with the purpose of numerous rogue drone structures seen in visual recordings captured earlier today. Larger structures found in rogue hives have a half-built appearance, though this can be typical for rogue drone structures as they often appear to grow over time according to need. Concord urges all space traffic to be vigilant and cautious in any areas where hives are reported until eradication efforts are completed. The increasing incidence of such infestations coincides with a number of attacks on multiple observatory posts maintained by the Association for Interdisciplinary Research. Initial analysis suggests death came swiftly to the crews of these two Nestor-class vessels after they were overwhelmed by a swarm of rogue drones while on research duty at this Air Laboratories observation post.
So an Air Laboratories facility manned by SOE ships gets attacked by rogue drones. I feel like that sentence, I should have started with that sentence as a way of like getting your guys' attention that this is all connected, right?
It is clear from other reports that these ships were part of extensive research into rogue drones being conducted by Air. The purpose of this research is unknown outside Air, but is variously rumored to include investigations into rogue drone AI systems, capital ship drone technology, or even advancements derived from triglavian mutaplasmid technology. The Scope contacted Air Laboratories for clarification of their research goals. An Air spokesperson responded with no comment. Air Laboratories researchers are anxious to recover any intact or partial data from the Air Rogue drone analysis nodes that have been collecting data and materials from hives and swarms. Air teams are on standby to extract logs and records from any research sites cleared by capsuleers. In light of the broader situation of increased rogue drone activity, Concord officials have also appealed to capsuleers to contain any infestation sites. Any materials directly recovered by capsuleers from these sites will be covered by the usual conventions and regarded as legitimate reward for their anti-rogue drone efforts. Concord is clearly showing itself as interested in the very same drone technology that Air is presumably investigating. Numerous police, military, and special forces divisions of Concord are known to be concerned by increased sightings of rogue capital-class drones. Infested ship hulls, rarely encountered for some years, have been joined by numerous fully constructed capital-scale drone vessels, indicating that drone ship construction technology is steadily advancing. Concord's interest in promoting investigation of the rogue drone threat is such that it has confirmed that a new deployable structure is under active development, intended to assist in field research of rogue drones. The device is being developed in collaboration with the expertise of Cryodron and Zyno, and is designed to emit powerful signals intended to analyze all nearby rogue drone activity. Concord Colonel Ovig Drust claimed the development of the structure demonstrates that firm steps are being taken to investigate and arrest the increased drone activity. Colonel Drust also stated that capsuleers can be assured that Concord will continue to guard against emergent threats that might imperil the safety of New Eden citizens. This is Lena Amber, reporting for The Scope.
Okay, so this is kind of interesting. Now, the question is, what could Air be interested in when it comes to rogue drones specifically? I guess for that, I'm just going to put, like, I've speculated in many different places that I think that rogue drones have developed unique, boring technology in order to travel distances. This is how they managed to break into the Triglavian Collective's territories. Talked about that a few different places. So, like, the idea that the rogue drones could have been connected to transportation, especially hyperspace route mapping, could be pretty critical here. But the point here is that the Air immediately come under fire from the rogue drones because of their research that's being done. They're clearly operating, at least with the support of the SOE, and we see despite suffering rogue drone swarms attacks from the observation posts as a previous series of attacks of capsuleer training facilities by an unknown force, The Association for Interdisciplinary Research is reporting that new stations are fully operational and secure. The technology and advanced training startup has refused to comment on the latest incidents affecting their research into rogue drones, but confidential source has confirmed Air Laboratories have initiated investigations into what went wrong and the lessons that may have been learned. In recent days, the organization has been more forthcoming regarding the reported attacks by unknown forces of air training centers. Excuse me, hold on. That's right, guineas. All right. A number of Air Laboratories facilities were recently targeted by an unconscionable attack. The Air family mourns a tragic loss of life and extends its most heartfelt condolences to all of those impacted by these events. We are cooperating with the appropriate law enforcement agencies while simultaneously conducting our own independent investigation into the attacks. Rest assured, the perpetrators behind these cowardly and inexcusable acts of violence will be brought to justice. May be important given the fact that they're just now going to be bringing out a new NPE. Could be a follow-up to some of this stuff. They haven't really made any deals with this. Akimaka Saraki comes out and gives his first major speech as the chairman. Confirmation of permanent head. Emphasizes the duty of the Caldari to the state, their corporations, and their family, leaning heavily on imagery of the rise of the state in Caldari-Gallente War, current prosperity of the mega corporations. This is that we remain Caldari no matter the cost presentation, I'm pretty sure. This just tells us more about Saraki again, the terror crisis, the CEP bombing. The permanent confirmation of Saraki represents a political victory for the combined TNR group of Hasiota, Ishikone, and Wikomi, the so-called ocean faction of Caldari megacorporations. Chairman Saraki is understood to have been accorded special executive powers by the CEP to oversee the reform of the Caldari state armed forces following the disastrous losses during the Triglavian invasions. And then we see Edencom budget agreed with responsibility for development and security of advanced countermeasures across against Triglavians underwritten. And this kind of ends this Edencom budget crisis that we've been looking at for the last several entries. Ooh. Excuse me. Sorry. Chairman Akimaka Saraki praises Caldari militia for securing and extending Caldari state interests within the colonial development zone. JSL Partnership awarded contracts to develop and equip new Caldari Navy and State Protectorate bases in Black Rise and Placid region. That would be Kalakiota and Sugavesta, getting their little reward. Federation Senate passes motion condemning growth of Concord's security state and urges FIO to review ties with Derail and Sorrow. Is this the same one? I think this is not it. That's it for this one, I think. Yeah. And then that's it for a while. So what we need to do now is go back and look at this, because this was YC123, which is apparently the year that was so important to the air group. Okay, so this goes from bottom to top, old to new. We can go back through what we've already done. We can see that there was, you know, the dread attacks and all that stuff is kind of the beginning of the year, which includes all of the protests and the bombing of the CEP Spire and the changeover of their command, which then, you know, in the same world, they... Wait, hold on. Actually, yeah. During the same time, we see controversy... No, not right here, a little bit later. We see that they start to do the Stargate construction, which is in the middle of the year, April, May. You see the Stargate construction start, which is when there's questioning. They start taking money from the New Eden Defense Fund to fund these Stargates, which then leads to further questions about Edencom funding, which leads to all of this other unrest. And the funding is in question. And then the Air is debuted in August. And then within a month, we have the funding situation restored, with a lot of the funding going to various different places, including Air having a mysterious amount of money that they don't want to give any information about for a project that they don't want to talk about, all leading to, you know, this latest announcement, which is the founding of Exordium. So we can say that Exordium was always the goal. Okay, guys, I know it's been a lot. I have a lot more to cover, or like different details that I've pulled out about all this, because one thing that is worth noting is that all of this is before the shipcasters. Okay, so all of this is before the novel transportation technology gets out. Edencom was examining the novel transportation technology. We also see Svarog actually in later stories deploy the novel transportation technology, but also, you know, we see like a big piece of all of this is the Edencom stellar monitoring that was set up in Uli at the same time as all of this. So what do I think happened? Okay. I think that Propel Dynamics had been working with the Sisters of Eve for a very long time in developing new warp and jump drives that were deployed on the various SOE ships, which were a key component to the SOE discovering locations like Thera. That technology, this transportation, this jump drive technology that is more stable than before, because remember, like they said here, it requires precise chartering, right? And the problem with chartering and the problem with these sorts of things is that it's not enough to just simply know what solar system you want to travel to, because the journey to that solar system goes through fourth dimensional hyperspace. And so you have to be able to map that journey, which means usually you'd have to have a local device in order to map the local space-time. You can't map the weird eddies of space-time from light years away. You have to have somebody go there to figure out what's going on. And this leads to like the Old Man Star story. I actually think there's no suggestion in here otherwise that they hadn't already, relatively speaking, charted Old Man Star system. They knew roughly what the journey was going to be to get there, and they still got it wrong because their jump drives were not fully perfected yet, which causes this catastrophe. So basic stellar phenomena can cause wild deviations in fourth dimensional hyperspace, and this makes, you know, this idea of blindly jumping to a new system under the old understanding of things incredibly risky. Even after these jump drives are made, they still have to be, it's still relatively slow. It still requires precise charting of fourth dimensional space-time. Otherwise, it risks catastrophe. And so they're right that this kind of charting of space would be under the public knowledge. Remember, these are all public statements. This is not omniscient information. These aren't universe portals telling us absolute information about things with EVE Online. This is a press release being put out within the universe explaining to the people of New Eden the understanding of the situation. So this could be a combination of bad information, lying, and kind of a specific framing of what's going on. Do they have jump drives by this point? Obviously. Can they travel those jump drives to another system? Maybe, but it would be slow, expensive, and require a whole bunch of charting, to the point where Concord has up until now not really bothered with it, right? You know, they've mapped wormhole space, they've mapped all these other systems, but we haven't seen, they focused on making new Stargates, which we'll get to that in a second, but we haven't seen very much interest from the empires in charting and mapping and connecting to brand new systems in the modern day, right? It seems like most of that expansion is already over. And so it would seem that Concord was not working on new charting programs at the moment. But then the Triglavian, and a big piece of why, a big piece of why is because it's not enough to just go to another solar system, right? That solar system you have to find a point in that solar system that's resonant with one of the points in one of the solar systems that you already have in order to be able to make that Stargate connection, or maybe even light a Sino, right? So, you know, we do know that people like the Talican use the power of stars in order to warp space-time to connect to systems that would otherwise not be connectable via the normal methods of space-time manipulation. So ultimately, there just wasn't a project to go and harvest new systems, because you not only would have to map all these different systems, but you'd have to find a system that was attractive enough and also eligible to make a Stargate. Enter the exert coupling. So the exert coupling, developed by Upwell in connection to Propel Dynamics, the same group that worked on the special Sisters of Eve jump drives, also worked on this new device that used Triglavian technology in order to make connections that were previously unavailable. And these things combine mean for the first time they think that they can just occupy new planets. It's not enough to just be able to transport there. The SOE were able to do that. They have to be able to guarantee that they can build a Stargate once they get there. And the exert coupling conduit coupler proves that. So what happened? What happened was this Ishikone person, or Propel Dynamics, or whoever it was, like this agent, this group, this idea that was fostering between the Sisters of Eve and Propel Dynamics and kicking around Upwell and this other stuff, this idea that we can make new Stargates starts being sold to Concord. Hey, by the way, guys, we can help you make new Stargates. And to prove it, they decide to do a secret project, or not a secret project. Obviously, everybody was aware of it, but nobody was fully understood why it was happening. And that is the Stargate Trailblazer project, right? They said, okay, this exert coupler, we can use this technology to build new Stargates, and they will work. And so with the combination of the four empires and the Stargate Trailblazer project, taking money from the New Eden Common Defense Initiative, who don't need the money anymore because the invasions are over, they build these four Stargates, proving to the entire cluster, or at least the groups that mattered to this, that they could do this, right? And then from there, they go to Concord and say, hey, with all this shit going on, with all this unrest going on, Concord needs its own space, and we can help you get that. If you work with us, we will use our new transportation technology and our new Stargate construction technology in order to develop this, this new area of space with you. And at the same time, we will help regulate and standardize the capsuleer onboarding services in this whole thing, bringing together all of these different resources between what Ishikone's been working on, what the SOE have been working on, and what some other stuff was going on, in order to offer this solution to Concord. And because we can even see, like I said, Air approached them. So this wasn't a matter of like, why, some people have said, if they wanted to colonize new planets, why don't they just send out AI systems? We can just send out drones through jump drives and they can just light a Sino when they're there or something like that. Well, it doesn't matter if it has a 99% fail rate. You just throw enough money at the situation, you can get a positive connection. Well, they may not want to be visible by using a Sino, but also B, like, that still has to be worthwhile. There was no project in place to try to do this. So even if that could theoretically work, there was no will within the cluster to perform this kind of action. But now that the Sisters of Eve has perfected their ability to chart systems and travel to systems like they did with Thera, and the exert coupling and Upwell's proof of their ability to create new Stargate connections, now this partnership comes and pitches to Concord this new offering. We will take over your Capsuleer onboarding process, and we will help you build a brand new area. All you have to do is pay Ishikone and their friends a fabulous amount of money so that way they can build all those facilities for you. And so they bring back the money for the New Eden Common Defense Initiative. They shunt it away from EdenCom, and they give it to a new organization that at the end of the year announces themselves as the Association of Interdisciplinary Research. I think that if we go through the entire history of what was going on in YC121, we see a clear line of discovery through all of these things as Ishikone is trying to find a better edge over the matter, especially with Lidai advancing their efforts by making the subcranial nanocontroller. There's a huge weakness to Ishikone. This puts them in the exact situation to be looking for a new solution, and this is the solution that they went with. We can help you with build stuff for Capsuleers and create this new protected region that is owned and operated by Concord. And so secretly, they've been working together in this way quietly until they've announced this new region. And the last piece to all of this that's weird is that the fun thing about all this, if AIR is in fact working with hyperspace telemetry mapping, if that's the big thing that they've been working on top of, because we didn't know what AIR Laboratories was actually researching and working on, right? We only know that they're doing Capsuleer stuff, but we knew that they did have this other research program that was well funded, but we didn't know what it was doing, which is why it makes it all the more interesting that when the Drifter crisis was happening and all these different slides came out, we have this picture. There are all the different pictures from the different four empires, right? All these different pictures from the four empires displays are their videos for those four empires showing their territories and stuff. This was the fifth slice, which was very confusing to us at the time. We don't exactly know what this means. It does look very ominous, and it shows the warden down here. You know, obviously this is connected to the Deathless, which of course now if we piece all these together, if Ishikone is connected to the Guristas and the Guristas are connected to the Deathless, and Ishikone is connected to Wiakomi, and Wiakomi is connected to Akimakasaraki, that's all interesting stuff. But it does seem like the Drifters are specifically calling out AIR Laboratories, there's the AIR Laboratories logo right there, in a way that we never understood before, and has always driven me insane, because like, why would this be here? It seems like such a random thing, and it never gets addressed, it never gets solidified, it never gets explained in any way, shape, or form. But if AIR was explicitly doing their research in hyperspace telemetry, in hyperspace transportation, in all these kinds of things, then that would put them directly on the radar of the Drifter forces and the Warden. And that could be why we see this here. So I have a few things here and there about other things when it comes to like the development of Upwell and with the Caldari state and everything. I know, I'm sorry if this has been somewhat scattered, but as you can see, there's a lot of different information going on that kind of points to this particular year and what was happening leading up to and away from that. And again, remember, a lot of this was a setup. Like by this point, they knew that what they were really doing was setting up the pre-story for things like the shooter, right? And so when they've created these sorts of groups like AIR and whatnot, they created these things with this kind of mystery piece to this, and this latest news offers us a hint as to what this has all been before. And I think that when I started to look back, knowing what we know now and going back, I see strong connections between Ishikone and the Ocean faction versus the Forest faction, the connections with Garistas, and the connections with the SOE and their development and technologies. It seems like there's a clear line of secret development of technology connected through Concord that leads directly to the founding of Exortium and explains why in their press release they would explain it this particular way, which a lot of players, which with omniscient player knowledge, see this as being a contradiction to previous lore. I don't see it as a contradiction to previous lore. I think that this is what happens when you have a group, people that are not, they understand space-time a lot better than we do, like the players of the game, like now in the year of our Lord 2026, but it's still very a nascent technology for them. Even the Jovians, when they use their transportation technology, only go to places that have already been well mapped. This idea of going to foreign bodies that haven't been well documented or well mapped out is very, 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 very new. Now, not necessarily as new as this year or even 2021, but I think that we can see that there's been very clear development of technology that has been spurred on by Triglavian technology, because we later see a lot more stuff when it comes to the Triglavian transportation technology with the development of the shipcaster and all that kind of stuff. We also see there's some other stuff where Svarog seems to have used that transportation technology themselves in different ways when it comes to the Shadow Wars. But it also, the other piece to this that I like is if we go back to the Edencom Memorial, back to the very beginning, where we were at the beginning of the stream. So, Yulai obviously was never taken over by the Triglavians. That's a good point. But you know what Yulai is? Yulai is a blue star. It's a blue star. In fact, it's a BO blue star, which is a pretty nice blue star, which would make this a very good system for a Triglavian invasion. If the Triglavians had wanted to, this would have been a candidate system for Triglavian invasion just by the nature of the star itself. It wasn't, obviously, and Edencom has managed to keep the system for themselves, or Concord has managed to keep the system for themselves. And remember that anniversary of Pochvin, which is literally like a month and a half after the air laboratories debut themselves, they develop this giant facility that shows, okay, well, here's the memorial, but what is this? What is this? This is the Edencom Stellar Monitoring Center in Yulai, surrounded by 4 observatories monitoring this star. So if Air was undergoing secret projects to travel and map different candidate systems to create a new network of systems using this new Triglavian technology in order to offer this, to create Exordium for Concord, they need an anchor point, and that anchor point is Yulai. And that is why we have these observatories here. That's why this entire facility exists. It's a giant cover to allow them to be carefully monitoring the star system as they're proceeding to do the rest of the stuff for the establishment of Manifest and Exordium. And and it took them a few years to do it. But it looks like we're going to be just a month or so away. I imagine that with the SSCT being a member of Concord and everything else, especially with what we saw from the news about the Exordium stuff, we will first get to see Exordium very, very soon, likely at the beginning of next month with the beginning of Capsuleer Day, but we will absolutely see it by FanFest and the expansion, where it will become the new headquarters for Concord and Air to help usher in all Capsuleers into New Eden. So that's it. That's my conspiracy theory. I think that it all kind of makes sense, and it shows a deep connection between the Ocean faction of the Caldari state, the Sisters of Eve, and Concord to secretly develop this new technology, with some of the other empires getting to kick in a couple of points along the way. What do you guys think? I thought it was all O1s and AOs and G5s. It's all 3 blue star systems plus the G1 gold or G5 gold. A random Sino in an uncharted system suddenly shows up in somebody's jump list. Yeah, that'd be cool. Colony ships have drones. Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is that you could have colony ships that are all AI, but then you run into some AI problems. You could argue that the entire drone lands was an early experiment to that. There's all these other little threads to this story that you can go down. I needed to find some paring down, and so I focused mostly on YC123, because that's when they explicitly peg as being when this air project began. But I don't know, man. I also thought that, I was wrong about the death list, so keep that in mind. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think that that Air Laboratories is a secret cover for Ishikone and SOE to... Oh, there's the other piece to that where, like, since you have the SOE tied into all of this, remember the SOE were also working on the Drifter clones, the Drifter clone tissue samples, which eventually become the Alpha clones. And so that grows into the fact that Air is, like, helping onboard so many new capsuleers. They've made the entire process more efficient. It just makes so much sense that the people, the groups that we know from like 2011 to 2016 and everything that they were doing, resurface themselves and work together now that they have new technology from the Triglavians to develop all of this new stuff. That's my thought. But, what does this all have to do with rogue drones? And how does that have to do with 3 rogue drones in our trench coat, who's hopefully going to be president? We'll have to see. Like I said, we're just going to have to see how this all plays out. I just wanted to... If there's anything that you guys have to throw in there, because I know some of you guys are also really big into lore and stuff, this is all very... I'm just trying to piece everything together. There's a lot of... looking into it. Yeah, thank you for that. 25 likes with 60 people watch. Like the stream. I will say this, guys. When I say like the stream, I know this is silly, but not the heart that's like at the bottom of the chat, but there's like a thumbs up and a thumbs down. Make sure you hit the thumbs up. That is the like that counts. I get the feeling, since they put in that heart, that a lot of people click the heart, which is nice, and it makes me feel good because I get to see the heart come up. But it doesn't matter for the algorithm. What matters is that little thumbs up button that should be below the stream. That's what ultimately counts as a like, by the way. So, and I'm pretty sure that it's true because I can watch the likes, and as I say that, I can watch the likes go up. So I can only speculate that I'm correct, that people may not realize that. Okay. So what next? What next is we have the Gallente presidential elections, though it should be announced tomorrow. I do have plans to stream and talk about that a little bit. I don't know what else we're going to cover tomorrow per se. But we, the expectation is that there will be enough meat for us to chew on when it comes to that. Tenzin has it in the bag. I don't know about that. But again, we have the Capsuleer Day coming very soon, which is going to be the next big thing for all of this lore. And FanFest and stuff. There has also been some other videos. Tomorrow, if we don't have anything else to talk about, I've got, there's some videos about Dust. And of course, we can always poke at Frontiers, which has been very, very exciting recently. So we'll do all that. So I should be back tomorrow to talk about the presidential election. But either way, please go ahead and hop in our Discord, where we talk about all these kinds of things. We'll be talking about it there as soon as we get any information about it. Yeah, I know that there's a new video that's like their advertisement for FanFest. The only thing I can say is if you can get to FanFest, you should go. Otherwise, we will be covering it. But yeah, pretty crazy stuff, huh? While I was putting together these theories, I did have to like struggle to not try to combine these two, because like they're so tangentially similar, and there's this question of like, well, if Alex is Alice, who's behind Alex? And with her connection with rogue drones and all these other connections with rogue drones, but the problem is that rogue drones is such a big thing, especially with their connections with the Triglavians and the Drifters. It's kind of hard to be like, that's the linking piece. That said, though, if you are interested, I do have my theory about the rogue drones when it comes to their ability to travel. And I speculate that the rogue drones are the inventors of the filaments that are used by the Triglavians to escape the abyss. But that's a conspiracy I've covered on another day. But let me know down below in the comments. Please let me know what you guys think about this theory. Do you have any other pieces to all of this? Anything else that you know about Propel Dynamics and Ishikone Corporation specifically? Because Propel Dynamics really does feel like the linchpin on all of this that I don't feel like I've gripped onto quite enough. It's hard to exact follow where they are and aren't in this whole scenario. I didn't see that they were a major group of Upwell, but Upwell has given them credit for pieces. They are associated with the the SOE, but also like that one thing says that they're not part of Ishikone. So if they're part of Wiakomi, that would be interesting. That would be exciting. But I think that for me, the biggest thing here is that like this whole corporate politics between the Caldari state has always been kind of confusing to me, especially this latest corporate realignment thing, because the corporate realignment was the big piece of this like big push in lore. 2021 was a big push in the lore, especially when they delayed the shooter by pushing it from Project Nova to what would eventually become Vanguard. You could tell that they were like, okay, well, we've got more time to set up the story. And so we see a lot of lore coming out during the Triglavian invasions and around the Triglavian invasions, especially stuff involving planets and foot soldiers and war clones and all these kinds of things. And so I've watched these for a long, long time for all those sorts of reasons. But one of the big pieces of all of this is this corporate restructuring of the Caldari state. They used to be divided into like Patriots, and there's like the Warhawks and all this sort of stuff. But they even point out in one of these articles about the formation of the different factions that this is a major realignment in corporate politics, where previous enemies within the megacorps are now allied with each other. And so like CCP's always kind of done it like a wink and a nudge that there's something to all of this, but the results of it and what these three factions are really up to have been kind of in the shadows still, right? We knew that like PKN is the biggest one. They're the ones that do Hypernet. They're the ones that did JITA. They're the ones that are always like in the news and doing stuff. And it's the other two that have always been kind of questionable. Kalikiota and Sugivesta with the Mountain faction got the deals when it came to faction warfare, building up the faction warfare supplies. But even that never really went anywhere. There wasn't any new faction warfare stations that were put out, as far as I know, that was connected to that. Although there might have been strong connections between that and maybe the development of stuff in Syndicate. But it was that combined TNR, the Hasiota, Ishikone, and the other one group that has always been kind of a sticking point for me with understanding what they were really up to. Because the only real thing that they were up to was they got the contract for air manufacturing. And Air has been doing their damnedest to be as quiet as possible since then. So I think that now, with everything going on, and with this new exordium and the information that we're getting out of this, it becomes clear not only what Ishikone and friends have been up to, but also why they've been so quiet about this. I think there's a fair thing to be said about the fact that like SOE got in trouble because of the mystery around Thera, and then SOE also got in trouble in regards to the Drifter cloning tissue stuff. This is part of sine wave alpha and omega. You know, they got in low-key trouble with quiet trouble with Concord based on all that. And so between that and what's going on with Ishikone and Lydai, it would make sense that they would want some sort of firewall for their operations. And so they work together to create this new organization, AIR, that allows them to use this technology that both Ishikone, or rather, Ishikone and Associates have been working on, along with SOE and Associates have been working on, to, you know, reshape the political landscape of the universe. All remembering that this all leads to military campaigns and the shooter. So they may seem like everything's hunky-dory now, but something tells me it's not going to be as straightforward as any of the power brokers would really like it to be. So I'm not going to make the lore work for CCP. They better come up with something good. Yeah, like I said, I know that there's a lot of people that are very upset because of the supposed, you know, contradictions in this lore. Again, I hope at least a little bit I've demonstrated that I think that can be explained both by emergent technologies and a thin understanding by the population of what's going on. You know, this is what Concord is willing to let people know in a universe in which there's the war of a million lies. So there's a bunch of other pieces to all of this. There's so much other tinfoil and conspiracies. I do recommend watching some of my other videos and stuff, but we will be keeping on this as hard as we can going forward. And I hope, if nothing else, this has been a fun little jaunt for everybody and a way to catch up on some of the lore pieces that have been going on. A look at a lot of the events that we've been looking at several different times recently, but from a new lens. All that said, I've been Ashtarothi. It's hard for them to finish up on a lore thread when they focus on catering towards each player group, each expansion. I mean, yes, but I mean, that is the challenge of the storytelling, though, right? But also, like, these things do take place over the course of time, right? It does take time for things to do stuff. It would have taken decades for them to create Exordium. They managed to create it in 3 years. Propelled Dynamics is either independent or belongs to a Forest Faction Megacorp. See, that's just one of the things that, like, I'm trying to chew on. I haven't been able to really nail it per se. I think that Ishikone might have stolen the tech from Propel Dynamics. But the connection between Propel Dynamics and Concord, or sorry, Upwell, is another piece to this whole thing. Obviously, this theory is not fully there yet. There's still a couple of things that need to be worked out, but there clearly seems to be the traces of a conspiracy that is meant to be found. Yeah, Propel Dynamics is part of Upwell, but I couldn't find how that exactly played out, so I'm going to have to look into that more. But yeah, I mean, that's it. It's been 24 hours, so that's what I can come up with in 24 hours. I hope you guys liked it. Please like the stream if you did. All that said, I've been Ashtarothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put Eve into context for you, my fellow Imperians. Thank you guys so much for checking out the stream, watching it, hanging out, watching the whole thing. It's so important for this channel. You know, this is how I get to, I get to do this for you guys, and this is how I get to take care of my guinea pigs, which, hold on. I know. This is who you've been hearing this whole time, off and on. One of the two. This is Mini Guinea. They've been doing fine. His brother's still in the cage. You're hearing them squeaking. So yeah. If you like what I do, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing, becoming a supporter or a patron, all of those great things. Also, you can come and join us in game. The Convocation of Imperians is recruiting. We maximize player engagement with EVE Online. And also, if you are new to EVE or just have never used the buddy code before, you can get 1 million free skill points, which is 40 days of alpha training, 20 days of omega training for free. Even if you've already, it doesn't matter how old your character is or anything like that, you can do that if you've never done it before. Use that link that's below or in the comments now or in the chat now. And that goes to somebody who helps make this stream and the Convocation possible. You can also pick up some merch, including a mug, which is not here at the moment. Awesome. Oh, here it is. You can pick up merchandise like a mug or t-shirts or whatever. You can become a patron, etc. It's all very, very useful, and thank you, because that's how I get to have things to take care of my puppy and my guinea pigs. I don't know what else to say. I do want to give a special shout out to my top tier supporters: 745 MPSI, Arydanika the Queen, Bad Boy Smooth, Evo Elite, Erladis, Elange, Flash Gordon, Grims, May, Malak, Starfire, Malin, Mercuton, Michael, Neelam, LM1, Sheesh, Susuro, Thrans, and Rid. Thank you all so much. I have been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and until next time, I'll see you in space. I just realized I totally messed up. I was supposed to do a Skinner giveaway today. I was going to do a Skinner giveaway today. I was too excited. Next time I stream, please remind me. We'll do a giveaway and we'll do another custom Skinner for someone. All right. I'm sorry. I forgot that completely. Shame on me. Probably tomorrow. Be here for that. That's your warning. I love your faces.
Bring on the wrecking machine. For every city